remember like being that. So, how y'all doing?
It's good, I know. All right.
Well, with my.
All right, it is, good afternoon, the time is 5:01, June 7th, 2023, and this DC State Board of Education working session is now called to order. This month's working session is being held in person at the Marion S. Berry Junior Building. However, in-person attendance is limited to members and staff of the board and guests. This working session is being live streamed on the State Board's YouTube page for members of the public to attend. The State Board will continue holding working sessions and public meetings in person. Please visit SBOE.dc.gov to learn how to submit and or present testimony at a meeting of the State Board. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Executive Director Butler, please call the roll.
I'm going to start with our student representatives. Representative Bernstein. Present. Representative Washington. Representative John Burgess. Representative Wages. Representative Henderson.
Here.
Representative Chang.
Here.
Representative Betts.
Here.
Representative Goulet. Representative Williams. Representative O'Leary.
Here.
Representative Thompson. Representative Regan.
President, I guess.
President Thompson, you have the.
All right, a quorum has been determined and the State Board will now proceed with the meeting. Again, welcome to our June 7th DC State Board of Education working session. At this time, I'm going to give a voiceover to the leadership report members. You should have received an email earlier today with a recap of all the both State Board business that are reminders, in addition to some of the highlights from the leadership meetings we have had with other agencies this month. The first thing in that list is social studies. You already know that will be a big portion of this meeting. So I'm going to have some time going into the updates around social studies too. A couple of updates on budget. So the staff is actually working on an update on which items in our priority letters have been, I guess, secured in this final budget. There are, as we know, there've been a whole bunch of shifts in this budget process, especially in the education cluster. So we want to make sure to provide you all an update of where the priorities stand, in addition to the agency requests that we have been keeping you all abreast of. Next, we mentioned a couple times about the fact that we will be reviewing future standards. We, of course, met with OSCE because we meet with OSCE every month, and we are excited to build out a shared timeline. The next step in that process is going to be an interagency staff meeting, emphasis on the staff, which will happen later this month. We should also expect financial literacy and environmental literacy standards to be coming to us next. Moving on, teacher retention. The staff is still working on a crosswalk of the Robert White bill, the data warehouse, and what IT has produced in their most recent report. We will be sharing, once that is complete, we will share that out with members, in addition to the chairman, because he asked us explicitly how those things align or did not align. We know Dr. Grant actually asked for us to align, all the parties to align overarching goals and metrics. And I believe Bernice and Andrew are going to work to lay out some key questions. So as all of those things are done, we will circle back with members. This gets into the board business reminders. I'm sorry, one more thing. The state board and council, last year was the first time we did a breakfast with the council. The breakfast was virtual. At the time, President Sutter and I attended just to give an update on board work and business. So they would know what was coming before the board. The chairman and his staff are working to identify some things likely this fall. We're hoping that will be in person. We're also hoping they can identify from this large enough majority of the members, at least to attend. We'll continue working with the council to identify points of engagement so they know the work that is before the board, in addition to building out understanding and potential areas of considerate collaboration. Friendly business reminders to the board. Thing one, the state board student advisory committee application, which is both for our advisory committee members and our representatives, is open. It closes June 15th. If you have not yet, please share it with your networks. If you have, keep sharing it with your networks. That is really one of the few bodies where students can have an active voice in education policy. So we want to make sure that we have students on the body. Next. Director Butler did send a poll asking for people to complete dates, preferred dates for a fall member retreat. If you have not done so, please do that. She asked that everybody complete the poll on June 7th. Those dates are looking at Saturdays, I believe, in September. Finally, as far as board updates and friendly reminders, public meeting panels. Thank you. Again, for all the work that went into the public safety panel, which I know we're going to be briefed later in the meeting. This is your friendly reminder that please fill out the link included if you have suggestions for other panels, so we can continue to build that out together. We'll continue to sending it out regularly. We will also build out working session panels. Public meeting panels based on work plans and committee agendas. Are there any questions about the leadership? Oh, and I'm sorry, last thing, which I'm sure Director Butler will cover as well. It has been a really busy, as you tell, it's been a really busy month, despite the fact that we've had Memorial Day and everything else. We've been able to welcome 2 new staff members. And so, of course, like you have already welcomed them, but this is Jen's first. So thank you to Ms. Bennett and welcome our new staff. All right, are there any questions about the leadership? All right, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and our executive director. Go ahead.
Good evening, members of the state board. May was a busy month, as President Thompson mentioned. Particularly for the staff, it was a month of transition and preparation for our team. We have filled our final FTE, so we have 0 vacancies. So please join me in welcoming Jen Leonis as our Deputy Director of Policy and Research, who started May 22nd. At our last working session, we welcomed our new Administrative Support Specialist, Javon Marshall, to the team. Jen brings a wealth of education policy and project management expertise to our team. We are excited to have both of them on board. Now that our positions are filled, we are kicking off an opportunity to grow and expand our staff. Thank you to Dr. Grant, who has accepted the invitation to join us to kick off our Ed Hour speaker series in July for the SBOE team on Friday. The series will aim to support my staff in connecting the dots to see larger local education landscape and highlight the various leadership trajectories, philosophies, and experiences in our local education ecosystem. More importantly, in addition, our agency has completed the requirements and paperwork to secure student interns through the Marion Berry Summer Youth Employment Program. Thank you to Javon for your leadership and moving us across the finish line. The next SBOE team will be celebrating our student advisory graduating seniors on Monday, June 12th at 5 p.m. here at 441. We invite all state board members to join us during that time as we bestow certificates of service and custom graduation stoles on their shoulders to celebrate their successes and their hard work and dedication as one of the most active student voices in education policy. In my role this month, Stacy has also been a part of meetings with the DC Office of the Attorney General, Inspector General. To kick off the audit of DC programs and the fiscal year 2023 annual comprehensive financial report. We anticipate group engagement with the Office of the Inspector General of each annual process. Next, our team has begun to plan for fall. We're in conversations with the national baseball team to do tabling at a game in September to kick off back to school and to host our student advisory first meeting of the year. So we're excited about their partnership and to bring our youth like them together in a fun space. Members, we have also begun planning for the board retreat this fall. Please complete the poll in your inboxes with your availability as soon as possible. Lastly, the SBOE team is working hard to ensure that each of you have what you need to do your best work as members. Please remember that your responsiveness to our requested emails are vital for all of our success. Thank you, President Thompson.
All right, do members have any questions for Executive Director Butler? All right, if there are no questions, I do have a comment. So I want to thank all the members who are hosting SYEP fellows this summer. That is not a requirement, but it will be awesome. And it really does like create opportunities for young people. So thank you to those members who are hosting. It is much. And we are going to turn to what I think might be the bulk of our meeting. So over the last 4.5 months, at least, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education has worked with the stakeholders to gather and incorporate feedback in the draft social studies standards from the public and members. Tonight, they will share their latest and greatest version of the social studies standards. I believe that it is the greatest. Review the latest updates they have made to ensure that social studies standards will go on at our public meeting aligned with the guiding principles of the board voted on previously and highlight the next steps for implementation support. I'm very pleased to turn over the next 75 minutes of our meeting to Dr. Christina Grant, who gets to join us for public session, but this is her first working session. Elizabeth Ross, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Madison Cantor, our Instructional System Specialist from Happy, and of course, Andrew Ball, our Deputy Chief of Staff. So you guys are funny. We are ready.
Thank you so much, President Thompson, and thank you all for letting me join the working session. It's been 2 years and this is my first one. And I think it names the importance of the conversation we're seeking to have. I tend to let the awesome team at OSSI navigate working sessions, so much so that I'm not going to be allowed to speak after these opening remarks because this really is their work. But it's a historic moment for all of us for so many reasons. President Thompson framed the last 4.5 months, but we haven't updated our standards since 2006. And there is such an exciting opportunity, particularly at this moment in time in DC and in the country, to really rethink the way we approach the most critical component of education. I'm also biased because I was a social studies teacher. I'm a trained political scientist. I think if we can train students on how to turn corners in their thinking, to meet people in the middle, we actually could produce a better society. And so I do, want to thank every member of the board, particularly Kathleen from your team, for the collaborative work over these last few months. For me, it's a decided shift from where I felt we were a year ago to where we are now. In December, we released draft standards, and we've been really transparent and collaborative about the process and the road ahead. it makes me so happy to know that we have letters of support from CPS, we have letters of support from our public charter school board, we have national organizations that have weighed in and said our approach is the right approach, it's the balanced approach. And even today, we are aligning on final language. And I do just want to take a final moment and acknowledge the great work of President Thompson and Vice President O'Leary. From Vice President O'Leary giving me a textbook and telling me to go recreate this, to sitting on the phone and talking with me at length about the history of DC, the history of our school system, and your dedicated commitment to tag teaming this to the end, and the urgency around ensuring we can get this done in June. I think if all of us lived through the federal debt ceiling crisis last week, within a week, we had to add up all our money and see what was going to happen, but we are not operating in jest when we say it is urgently important that we achieve a vote in June so that we can move forward with implementation. And we have set aside $500,000 of ESSER funds to do that. If we miss the window, we miss the opportunity to make that investment. We will have no choice but to allocate those monies in a different way because we are up against clocks that mature every December. And so I think I've given a sufficient welcome. I do want to name the great work that's ahead. We will land the page on social studies, and then we will turn our attention to financial literacy. We have begun our work on environmental standards. We are going to issue a great report in September on literacy and become very clear about the investments we're going to continue to make in that instruction. And for me, this vote will actually occur on my 2-year anniversary. And for me personally, it marks just what is possible when a state agency can work alongside their state board in service to our children. And for those of you who have been on the board for some time, I hope that truly you know the market shift and our ability to do great work together, and would say that this is just the beginning. And so I will now turn it over to this amazing group of individuals who, every time you all respond, we all get in a huddle and we land the plane, but I could not be more thankful to do this work alongside you all. We are pulling it off. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Dr. Grant. It is a pleasure to be here. We have a packed agenda tonight. We're going to start by just providing a brief overview of where we have been 2019 through March of this year. That 2019 is not a typo. We have been at this meeting for some time, and it gets better and better as we go. And then from March 28th through present, we'll do a deep dive into the round of standards revisions that we have made since the last time that we met here together with you. And then we'll talk about some highlights associated with the standards, and finally some next steps. Next slide, please, Bernice, and the following one after that, please. As this group knows well, the standards revision process began in 2019. SBOE directed OSLE to develop culturally inclusive, anti-racist, updated social studies standards. In 2020, SBOE adopted guiding principles created by the SISAC, the Social Studies Standards Advisory Committee, which called for fewer, clearer, higher, more rigorous social studies standards that focus on diverse histories and an evaluation of power and democracy. In 2021, OSLE convened a group of DC educators under the guise of the Technical Writing Committee, or under the frame of the Technical Writing Committee. These individuals worked to write, edit, and revise the standards. Simultaneously, OSLE convened a panel of social studies experts to review the standards and had those standards reviewed by social studies experts prior to releasing them for public comment in December of 2022. Public comment was initially open for 45 days, and in response to feedback that the public needed more time to comment, OSLE extended the public comment process, and we also met directly with LEAs in order to receive feedback from the entities that would be responsible for implementing the standards. OSLE translated the standards into Spanish and then closed the standards public comment on February 10th of 2023, excuse me. In February and March, OSSE worked to review and synthesize all of the public feedback and also hosted LEAs in an implementation meeting at the end of the month to begin unpacking and understanding what kind of support LEAs and educators would need to implement the social studies standards well. Next slide, please. Moving from March to the present, OSSE has been working hand in hand with the State Board of Education, as Dr. Grant mentioned, to participate in the public sessions that State Board held in order to get feedback from constituents. We've also been listening and watching and reading closely at the public meetings that State Board has held, and really appreciate State Board using its platform and its time to hear directly from the public about the social studies standards. It's been fantastic to be able to not only watch, listen to the public's comments, to State Board's questions to those witnesses, and then to be able to review feedback and commentary. So thank you, this body, for making that opportunity available. In May, SBOE provided OSSE with a written set of comments that OSSE worked to incorporate and respond to on May 26th. And that is the draft that we are primarily here to discuss tonight. Madison, please go ahead and talk us through the revisions.
So the next couple slides contain examples of the revisions OSSE has made to the social studies standards since we released the standards to you in March. OSSE has also provided a copy of the red line standards document, which contains the original standards language, along with each revision OSSE has made since March 29th, the last presented for working session. Each revision aligns with feedback provided by the State Board of Education and the public. And OSSE has also made additional revisions of standards to ensure the standards are clear and comprehensive when necessary. And we're grateful to the feedback from the state in that regard as well. A detailed comprehensive response to public engagement was also provided on May 26th. And so the report, red line standards, and a clean version of our standards can all be found on the OSSE Social Studies website, as well as were provided to you on May 26th. As with the last set of revisions, OSSE has consulted with experts and members of the TWC prior to making significant changes in standards, and we're committed to ensuring that the standards remain aligned to the guidelines. Thank you. So the State Board of Education offered specific feedback urging OSSE to increase the economic content present in standards. So in response to that feedback, OSSE has added standard GC.45 to compare and contrast at least 3 economic systems: capitalism, mercantilism, communism, socialism, and libertarianism, and produced a claim about the strengths and weaknesses of at least one economic or political economic system to ensure there is an explicit evaluation of different economic systems within the standards. OSSE is also committed to ensuring that curricular resources support the development of economics content through the standards, and will ensure educators are supporting and delivering robust economics content for their students. This includes ensuring that globalization standards include resources to evaluate globalization's economic impacts, and that we have specific resources devoted to supporting analysis on the impact of practices like redlining on access to economic opportunity in 21st century. State Board of Education also offered specific feedback urging OSSE to increase the representation of underrepresented groups, including addressing the modern history of Indigenous nations, increasing coverage of Jewish resistance, and including more comprehensive coverage of LGBTQ+ history, which is very appropriate this month. In response to the State Board of Education feedback, OSSE has worked with LGBTQ+ expert Dr. Stacy Brentsilver-Berman at NYU, who is also going to work with us this summer to develop the ancillary materials and to review the standards to ensure they are as comprehensive as possible, while still approachable by educators given the nature of source material for LGBTQ+ history. Dr. Brentsilver-Berman is excited by our standards and provided some suggestions for increased representation, which we incorporated as noted in green standards here. It's a little hard to see, but it's there. She noted that our standards were particularly comprehensive in terms of LGBTQ+ representation, especially in 7th and 11th grade, and complemented the focus on equity and representation is exceptional, and including emphasis on historical history was particularly exciting and will help students evaluate the history of LGBTQ+ populations. OSSE also included additional language about Jewish and other groups' resistance to the Holocaust, and Jewish resistance to discrimination in American history, and has added existing standards that covered modern Indigenous history, with a standard in US 2 that specifically covers modern or modern Indigenous history and culture in the present day. Slide. State Board of Education also asked OSSE to reconsider the vertical alignment of digital literacy skills between grades 3 and high school. Yes, sorry. So OSSE reached out to Ellen, thank you, dear boys. OSSE reached out to our media literacy expert to discuss ways to increase the vertical alignment of digital literacy slides without reducing the rigor of the content in early grades. And we work to adjust the language of digital media literacy in grades 3 to 12 to ensure that there is vertical alignment of skills. So in grade 3, students discuss the factors that affect the credibility of websites when given information about a source. And in grade 6, they begin evaluating the credibility of a website. In grade 8, they learn how to evaluate a source when there is scarce information about its origins. Next slide, please. And by high school, students are considering how to prioritize different sources when evaluating information. And we added the skill of click restraint, which is figuring out where not to click based on the title of a website as students are using and ranking Google search results. We also added a standard that covers the role of algorithms and machine learning in shaping information diet of different individuals. So the standard covers the kind of things that different people are going to see, for example, on their Facebook news feeds. Next slide, please. The State Board of Education also offered specific feedback to OSSE about reviewing the presence of democratic citizenship, civic dispositions, and experiences and standards. Before we start with the slide, we wanted to provide for you, in response to the feedback we wanted and the concerns from the public and SBOE, OSSE's developed a roadmap illustrating the evolution of students' understanding of democratic practices, democracy's alternatives, and the evolution of American democracy. Give you a quick second to check out that roadmap. And that will be available on our website as well. And there's sort of two versions. There is a summarized version of how we approach democracy in the K-12 standards and the highlighted standards. And then there's an appendix with a more comprehensive overview of each standard that covers democracy's evolution and democracy's alternatives. I want to start tonight by highlighting the democratic principles present in our standards. And I want to talk about grade 8. Grade 8 is not only an action civics course, but it's also a year-long evaluation of the promise and challenges of different forms and policies of government. The action civics course is designed for students to engage with democratic principles, as well as alternative forms of government as context for making decisions and then taking action. Rather than present students with binary examples of US constitutional republicanism and fascism, the standards engage students with a wide variety of governments, including democracies that function differently from American government. Students then engage in deep inquiry about the benefits and challenges inherent in our constitutional system, and then take actions to suggest changes to the American government, or to support the system within, or to figure out how the best way you can make change within the system is. So during grade 8, students consider the current structure of the federal government. They consider the ways the federal government can be responsive and sometimes non-responsive to the will of the populace. Students also compare at least 3 countries around the world and analyze the rights of citizens in those countries, how government ensures and protects those rights, and evaluate the extent to which the public has the ability to influence the decision-making of different governments globally. So they might compare structures of government that are much less responsive than the US government, for example, or governments that maybe are more responsive. OSSE has also added a standard in World History 1, asking students to evaluate the different structures of government, including Greece or Rome's structure, and the ways in which citizens can exercise power across civilizations within ancient history. In addition, in secondary grades, students evaluate circumstances that led to the rise of fascist leaders and allowed them to erode individual liberties And they also evaluate the modern day contraction of democracy in places like Russia, Mali. The government and civics course further engages students in the democratic principles and history of the United States democracy. Throughout the course, students engage with both major historical moments of democratic change and the modern implications of the U.S. democratic system. During the course, students analyze historic events and philosophies that shape the perspectives and authors of the U.S. Constitution, which would be supported with ancillary materials, including evaluating Montesquieu and the Magna Carta. And students evaluate the principles of the U.S. Constitution, including principles like the rule of law, consent of the governed, limited government, separation of powers, and federalism, and they evaluate the way in which these principles function today. Next slide. SBOE has also included standards on key turning points in democratic history, including the passage of the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments. SBOE has included an analysis of the gains of the civil rights movement and court and cases that have infringed on those gains in recent years. So in United States History 2, students evaluate the efficacy of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but also the modern challenges to both of those bills. In government, students evaluate the ways in which different amendments, including the 19th Amendment, expand access to voting and political participation in the United States. And we've added an additional standard in government about the specific expansion of voting across U.S. history. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. SBOE also received specific feedback about shifting the division between World History 1 and World History 2, so that World History 2 might begin in 1750. SBOE is not adjusting the course structure and sequence in response to this feedback. World History 2 begins in 1450 so that it aligns with the start of AP World History course, allowing students to access AP World History without taking the pre-AP course the prior year. Aligning the World History courses with the AP courses, just from a time perspective, provides an additional opportunity for students to take an advanced coursework. While the World History 2 course does have only 52 standards, the case study approach taken by 4 of the driving concepts necessitates that several of the standards are taught through the lens of 3 or 4 civilizations. Incorporating additional standards in World History 1 would make it really difficult to teach the full course in the allotted time, while providing students with the appropriate supports for developing historical thinking, writing, and literacy skills. SBOE received specific feedback that the standards should increase the coverage of the codification of race-based slavery and rebellions led by enslaved people. So SBOE has added a standard to grade 7 in which students evaluate the causes and impact of at least one rebellion led by enslaved individuals in the 18th or early 19th century, including the Stono Rebellion, Nat Turner's Rebellion, or Denmark Vesey's Rebellion. SBOE will also prioritize the development of primary sources that cover the legal codification of race-based slavery and the role of slave rebellions in American history. So for example, in grade 7, a standard asks students to evaluate the causes of the social and legal codification of race in the colonial era and the proliferations of a race-based hierarchy, including the impact of Bacon's Rebellion. So students will take a specific look at how slavery came to be codified and look at different theories for why that happened. SBOE also provided specific feedback that the standards increased coverage of modern history, specifically history after 2003. SBOE has added additional standards that cover modern history, including an evaluation of the impact of algorithms and machine learning on the information ecosystem. And consistent with the changes in the handout we will provide here in just a moment, we also included standards that address the presidency of Barack Obama and the invasion of Afghanistan. So we're going to pass out the additional standards that we've added pursuant to our conversation. I'll give Andrew a moment so we can get those standards. I think we saw that. Is my warming. I would also like to note that the grade 6, so the initial standards are on this handout as they relate to Barack Obama, the invasion of Afghanistan, which we know is before 2003, and some additional modern history and government standards. ASSE also notes that grade 6, global geography, action civics, and US government course all focus on current history and events. Our standards also include recent Supreme Court decisions, such as the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade and recent political polarization, including the rise of conservatism and the impact of the Trump presidency.
Well, all right, we're done.
All right. ASSE also received feedback from the public about the need to develop further supports for LEAs and educators in implementing the new social studies standards. What ASSE has heard consistently from LEAs who are getting ready to pilot and develop curriculum is that the greatest need is to find grade level appropriate primary sources to use with their students, especially in grade 2. Given that feedback, ASSE has allocated $500,000 in federal recovery funds to support the development of ancillary materials, primary source banks, and curricular materials over the next 2 years. ASSE has hired over 40 educators and curriculum leaders from across the city for the summer of 2023 to work with us to build out primary source banks, sample driving questions, social studies skills and lesson plan templates, and exemplar lessons for educators to use. ASSE is building professional development and coaching cohorts to support the implementation of high quality curriculum materials in the 2024-2025 school year. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about what the supports for educators and LEAs are going to look like. This summer, ASSE is hosting our first ever Social Studies Resource Institute. Educators, and as was already said, educators and curriculum leaders from across the district are going to join us to develop these ancillary materials to support implementation. We're going to meet from July 5th through July 28th, both synchronously and asynchronously. And this includes resource developer trips to Smithsonian institutions, the DC History Center, in consultation with a wide variety of subject matters on the Library of Congress, who's going to support us developing high-grade materials. And thank you, Alistair, so much for that connection. It was hugely valuable to ASSE has offered positions to 32 educators so far, and we've begun to work with 6 experts to support the development of materials to support our summer fellows in building robust resources. So educators, so we'll also have experts who are helping to office hours for our educators. During this institute, educators are going to build sample driving questions, primary sources, sample assessment prompts, examples of assessment prompts that do not meet the standards, which we think is really important, and links to ASSE vetted exemplar resources, lesson plans, and materials to build out educators' background knowledge. During the 2023-2024 school year, ASSE will revise and refine the resource bank, include modified source materials and lesson frames. ASSE is also hiring a 10-month fellow to support the development of background information resources and ensure that we have modified primary resources that are appropriately leveled for all grade levels to access. ASSE aims to release all finalized materials in April of 2024, which will give LEAs enough time to begin reviewing materials, and ASSE and LEAs can use the summer of 2024 to implement robust professional development around these resources. This summer, ASSE is also hosting 2 coaching institutes, an elementary historical thinking institute and a civic online media literacy institute. Educators from both institutes are going to sample pilot online curriculum during the 23-24 school year, and they will receive coaching around skill-based history instruction. ASSE will also use videos of exemplar educative practices to develop online professional modules that can be accessed by educators at any time across the district to ensure educators can see what an exemplar history lesson looks like under the new standards. We are also working with civic education organizations to develop comprehensive PD for action civics that we will begin launching in the summer of 2024. And we're also working with a civic education group to develop some more in-depth sample curricular materials, including sample lessons, since we know that is a new course. And then finally, we are also working with a small group of grade 6 educators to develop sample geography lessons and pilot them during the 23-24 school year. And like our other professional learning opportunities, we're going to film our educators in practice so we can develop online professional modules for grade 6 educators to see best practices and exemplar resources focused on the grade 6 geography.
Thank you so much for all that wonderful information, Madison, about how we're responding to the state board's feedback. After nearly a decade as a teacher, I'm still getting used to giving seated presentations. I'm used to walking around classroom, but so fair warning, I may use my hands a lot, so I know body language might be.
Get up.
A trigger. But I just wanted to provide a few highlights on important considerations as we conclude our engagement work with the board on our social studies standards. First, I want to highlight the process. I think that it's been a process that we can all stand behind and be really proud of, a model process for engagement. I know that OSSE has prioritized transparency and iterative engagement process and responsiveness throughout this entire time. We've been listening to you as you've been giving us feedback and from the beginning. So in our February working session, Representative Reed talked about how excited she was about the continued engagement process. At the March working session, Representative Boulay said, taking what the public has said and clearly reflected it back to us. Representative Williams said, I appreciate the responsiveness to each piece of public feedback. I'm heartened by the iterative nature of it. The process is just as important as the final product. And again, we understand that process is super important. And we heard you value that feedback for each piece of feedback that we gave. So it was so nice we did it twice, and we're doing it here again for you today, where we're providing you feedback on everything that you've given to us. And then in our April working session, Representative Boulay noted, I want to just echo what Representative Williams said. I think it's been a great process. I think you're listening to everyone. And again, it's really, we really appreciate that because we are listening. We think that listening is a really valuable tool to improve the outcomes. Representative or Vice President O'Leary said, the thing that sticks out to me is how responsive OSSE was to our questions. I want to thank you for that. And what we at OSSE want to say is thank you, because your feedback has really improved our final products as well as the public's feedback. The combination has made it better. And so we appreciate all the feedback that you have given to us so that our students are better set up for success. For example, we've completely revamped our World History 2 course as a result of feedback, as well as our digital literacy standards. In our first draft in December, we heard there was underrepresentation of groups, particularly around AAPI. So we amped up that inclusion. And greater inclusion of global thinking was is a feedback we heard. So we added a driving concept in our 8th grade action civics class to incorporate global thinking. And I know we're making a couple adjustments here again to incorporate even more global thinking. We've reduced Eurocentrism. We've also had a lot of feedback on individual standards that have strengthened and may have been missing. For example, Representative Henderson suggested DC 32 analyze the successes and unfinished work of the fight to desegregate schools in Washington, DC, including the role of Bowling versus Sharp. As someone who has written multiple papers on education segregation and been published on the subject, I am mad that I didn't come up with that standard myself, but that's the thing about having such broad feedback from the public, from you all, that more minds are helpful. And so something that may get missed, you all lift it up, and as a result, our standards are stronger. So thank you for that. Moving to the next slide. The process, though, is not the only thing we can be proud of. We can also be proud of the results, the product, the standards themselves. These are the most forward-looking, inclusive standards in the country, bar none. For the first time, DC will have standards that include LGBTQ+ history. It's important that our students learn about carving up. It's important that they learn about Oberthal versus Hodges and how it grew upon the legacy of Loving versus Virginia, right? It's important that they learn about the Lavender Scare. These are things that we want to make sure that all students feel reflected and that their families are reflected in their and incorporated and embraced in our standards. And so now our standards will do that. The standards also address modern threats to democracy. We've seen a lot of changes in our nation since 2006 when our current standards were passed. So we include the 2020 election, the increasing authoritarianism in the 21st century, the quashing of the Arab Spring, political polarization in the election of President Obama. All of this is information that has been added into our collective knowledge since 2006 and are incorporated into the new standards and are updated as a result. Also, action civics. I can tell you, as I talked 2 administrations into allowing me to teach a mini version of that action civics, and it was the the greatest experience that I had as a teacher. I was able to, I divided up my students into different teams. I had a team that went to a Ward 8 council meeting, and were able to present their vision for reducing gun violence to about 100 Ward 8 residents who stood up and gave a standing ovation, and it was a really great experience for them. I had another group who put on a performance where they actually had the then Ward 8 council member come and see them perform live. They did a rap and dance presentation again around reducing gun violence. And then I actually had another group that got in touch with Mayor Bowser and had a one-on-one or 3-on-1 sit down with Mayor Bowser, and was able to push their vision for using a public health approach to gun violence. And back then there wasn't the ONE's office, there wasn't the violence preventers. So, maybe it was all Kayla M. I don't know. She was quite persuasive, but genuinely, it was a wonderful experience, both as a teacher and for the students, because they were able to see that civic engagement is not something done just by certain people, but it's part of everybody's action as a resident here in the district, and that they had agency and power to create change. I mean, to be able to sit down with the mayor or a council member or put a plan into action to advocate for change, that's what civic engagement is about. That is what social studies hopefully does, is it gives you the skills and the knowledge to advocate to change the world. And so I know I'm super excited about having action civics. Hopefully you share that excitement as well. Also, digital literacy skills. I will say my students for the action civics class, they had to do research on public policy. And I had students ask me, well, how do I know if this source is a good source or not? Because I warned them, they're not all sources online are reliable. And they were like, I didn't have an answer for them. I just told them, ask me, and I will tell you if it's a reliable source. That's not a great answer. Now we're building skills for students to identify whether it's reliable over time, and those are scaffolded through the years. So we know in this time of increased misinformation online and increasing challenges to determine what is a reliable source, that this is a vital skill for students as they are growing and their abilities to determine what is a reliable source online. So also really excited to have that in there. And then finally, I just want to point out all the letters of endorsement from local and national leaders. The National Council for the Social Studies, which is the author of the C3 framework, which I know numerous of you representatives have held up, has issued us a letter of support, and they're not issuing letters of support to everybody. They did not issue a letter of support to our neighbors.
Name and stamp that. They did not, it is two things on this slide. One, we are the most forward-looking and inclusive standards in the country, hands down. And for better or worse, on the 22nd, we will have to lean in heavy on being the most inclusive and most forward-looking standards in the country. And also, the National Council for the Social Studies does not issue letters of support. They did not issue one for Virginia. They did not issue one for Maryland. It is very hard to get their seal of approval. And I even, I opened it and had a moment, we did it. You guys believe, and they've been working alongside us. And it is a huge mark that we will be one of the only jurisdictions in the country that has received their seal of approval as we're endeavoring to do this work. And so I think we should be very excited and also proud of this journey. Sorry, Andrew, I will not talk again.
No, I appreciate
Will
it.
not.
We've also gotten letters of support from individual national leaders and experts, including Dr. Kathleen Norris, who heads the curriculum department here at Howard University. Zinn Education Project, another national organization. And we just today received a letter of endorsement from MICVA Challenge, which is another organization that I know I've heard multiple representatives lift up. And so we're excited to have their support as well. And of course, vitally important, we have letters of support from DCPS and PCSB. It's really important that we have the support of our LEAs as we move forward to implementation. So we're excited that they are excited to implement the new standards. So in sum, just as a result of the feedback that you and the public have provided, the incredible work of the TWC, which again, want to lift up the vital support of ASSI's Division of Teaching and Learning. You will have the opportunity to vote to support standards that the premier social studies experts in the nation support, that our LEAs want to use, and that provides students with the needed information to become citizens ready for the challenges of the 2020s and beyond. And I think that's exciting. I hope you share that sense of excitement. And now just we'll go to next steps. We are making slight adjustments as we've provided some to you today. A few tweaks and maybe based upon our conversation today might make a couple of their small tweaks, but we'll give you the finalized version of the standards on June 16th. The public session, as you know, is on June 21st. Then July 5th, our Social Studies Resource Institute kicks off. July 24th, Historical Thinking cohort begins. August 7th, the Media Literacy cohort begins. Then in the upcoming school year, we'll have a small grade 6 elementary and literacy pilot, and we will continue to develop ancillary resources throughout the school year, and then have a broader implementation beginning in 24-25 school year. And welcome your questions. Thank you so much for listening.
Can we go back just one quick slide? I just want to name again the timeline. So I've had lots of individual conversations, but I do want to name and show you directly that literally we pass the standards, we close out our school year, and the day after the 4th of July, which I don't know if it was intentional or not, but like the day after we celebrate our independence, we start our cohort kickoffs. And those kickoffs will be running throughout the summer and will lead into the school year. And so I remember talking with members saying like, well, why is it important that the vote happens in June? It's because we have teachers signed up, we've already gotten facilitators, like we are ready to shift into summer work. If we miss the window, we missed the summer. We cannot start implementation without standards. It'd be disingenuous to do so. And so I just want to name how hard this team is going to continue to work through the summer to really like push all of this great work forward.
Well, I want to appreciate the joy and enthusiasm in the presentation that came through. Members, question. I think actually, Representative Burns has put it first, followed by Coulee. I see Representative Reed's hand. We'll start with those group, Representative Lozeri 4.
Okay, thank you all so much for your time and your presentation. I had one quick comment that was like very small and then one question. For the World History 2 Standard 68, evaluate the causes, course, and consequences of the Holocaust, including the role of Jewish, Romani, Slavic, disabled, and or LGBTQ resistance to Nazism. I'd like to make the suggestion of shifting the word including to either and or as well as, because when it's listed like this and it says including, it seems like the role resistance played is part of like the causes and consequences, which I think we want to try and distance from because Jewish resistance wasn't part of that. So that's just a small like diction note. And then I'm not sure quite how to phrase this question, but I understand that the goal is to get the resources that are developed over the summer ready by April 2024. Are standards rolled out before then without the curriculum development, or is it curriculum development happens first and then the standards are rolled out?
What a great question. With the exception of small cohorts that are piloting certain areas, we don't anticipate standards implementation to begin prior to the 24-25 school year. So the 23-24 school year is preserved for development of curriculum resources to support implementation, with the exception of those pilot cohorts.
Got it. Thank you.
So I was talking with my predecessor on the way in here, and she's raised some great points. She thought some of them you guys incorporated them in, and others just want to see if we could tweak. We could get the final stages on it. And those were, as you targets democracy being one, the role democracy plays here in the US and then across the globe. Like, how do we tie that theme into everything that we have and make sure that kind of it's described as a unique and fragile experiment. So anything we can do to try to just, address that and how it fits together. I know a good teacher can work it into a lot of the different areas, but if we can just take a look at maybe how to strengthen that. And then the other thing that I was speaking with Watford about was the issue of immigration. I mean, the US being, a nation of immigrants. I know I can see where you could fit it in numerous places, discussions about that, but if we can strengthen that language a bit, I think it would be helpful, just because it's something that's so important right now. Both topics are really huge issues right now. So those would be things that I would just ask if you go to the final stage that you look at. Congratulations on the national award. That's really incredibly impressive. So just keep up the amazing work. And if you can try to look at that and see as we get to the finish line and then how you might be able to work that in. I think, Ruth has a lot of experience and great points on these. And then lastly, I know, Andrew, I'm gonna try to catch up with you maybe afterwards. I was looking at a transportation resolution, and I apologize, I haven't been able to connect before now, but I would like to comment through with you and get your feedback, before we roll forward with that. The final version. So I'll just maybe connect with you after this. But I just want to thank you guys. Great presentation, and just thanks for coming in.
You could thank former Representative Wattenberg. She was very helpful last year when we made the decision to pause our standards and kind of restart and regroup. She played a role in making sure we have a national advisory committee. And so please share our, we'll be talking through all of the folks who got us on this journey, but her advice last year was extremely helpful.
She may be listening too.
Oh, well, hello, if you're listening, Wave, thank you so much. And we will try to do the best job possible of naming all of the folks who got us to this place, but in you acknowledging her even current feedback, do want to acknowledge the role she played in getting us this far. And I would tell all board members, I've been speaking with leadership about this tension of, on the 21st, you're gonna say, well, what about air quality? Because, we need to make sure that kids understand the impact of climate and the history of it and how it's playing out, and the fact that we are a code red. And up until yesterday, I'm not even sure if people knew that we had air quality indicators. And so I've been really mindful with leadership of the importance of us, ending a 20-year problem. And then how do we set up the right processes, which we will be rolling out to the board in our July meeting, our cadence of standards, reflection, revision, such that as teachers are using standards, things that you have raised, Representative Goulet, and things that our teachers will tell us back, because history is not static, it's always occurring. And so that tension is going to be there. Obviously, we're taking copious notes. I will say that we want to be pencils down today, so we can actually achieve the goal of June 16th. And again, thank you for your feedback, and those watching who've gotten us this far, thank you as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just could everyone make sure that they are speaking loudly, because not everyone is being able to hear everybody on the live stream. We want to make sure that your comments and your questions are all heard. So okay, your projection.
Okay, so thank you for the updates, and it's good again to see not just the ability to engage, but then the actual adjustments. Yeah, it's appreciated. I will say, sitting here during your presentation, digging into the standards is probably the first time I was able to do so. And so while it's probably bad on the back end, it's good to kind of hear all the comments and then scroll through and say, oh, I think I saw that and I heard, or I saw this critique, and then here's the change. The only thing that slightly gives me pause, and I don't think it's like an end of the world thing, but it kind of reminded me of my 7th grade, my middle school experience. And I was kind of like, I hope we can take students a little further than what I did, was for the what is it called, the world geography. I noticed for most of the land, I can't say it's just continents, because you kind of group some of the land mass, but it's for a lot of the standards, it's like review 1. And I was like, 7th grade me reviewed 1. I would love 2023 DC students to be able to review more and maybe compare and contrast where possible. And it also kind of stood out to me because when it's related to more than 1, like when it's 2 for the standard, it's usually in times of conflict that's mentioned. And hopefully we can do more compare and contrast outside of just nature of conflict. So I think it's just to be able to say some language about, can we get a couple of more countries, regions, in each one of these because they're big swaths of land, like Africa, Asia. So those are only like small things. I don't think it's like the end of the world, like it will like really mess up your draft too much. But I would love to go beyond like investigating one region or one country or one this or that, and maybe if we can expand it, because I would love students to have be exposed more to more than I was. I actually remember my country was Mali. So, if we can make that adjustment, great. And I appreciate again, not just your engagement, but you taking the pieces back and giving us different iterations. That's the piece that is meaningful to me.
I will say thank you so much for that feedback. Really, really well taken. And we're happy to take it back. I will just name that one of the perennial challenges in this set of standards and in every set of standards is that natural tension between depth and breadth. And so there are certain places where we are explicitly supporting educators and then students to learn history through a case study method, which will enable them to go quite deep, but potentially not as broad. And so that's always a tension that we are balancing.
Gotcha. And
But
last
point
one,
very well taken.
the only thing about the Latin America and Caribbean, so that header is Latin America and Caribbean. However, when you get down into the language, it's either or. You always like is you keep referencing or. So it would be cool to just change that or to and so that folks can learn about Latin America and the Caribbean, especially being here in DC. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a couple of things. First thing is, I'd really like to welcome the real Andrew.
Oh, you just,
I mean, the guy that just presented to us wasn't the guy that's been here for the last couple of years. It was a fabulous presentation. And I didn't have to stand up and tell me. And that was really good. I do have a couple of questions. I'll reiterate what my comment said about where we are now with OSSE and the state board as far as the relationship. And since I've been on the board where we were, and it's night and day. And I know that we're going to hold you accountable for the new standards and everything, and hope, because we want these to live up to the praise that we as a city will get. And we're not going to get praise from certain states or certain places in the country, but that's their problem, not ours. I have two questions. One of them is, when you have the training sessions in the summertime, is it possible that somebody who may not have a job could be a fly on the wall to watch?
yeah.
Okay.
If somebody is you, let's warm for the listening public. Remember, Vice President O'Leary could be a fly.
And the other thing was, if I were a history teacher starting in the fall, and I had read all the new standards, I would really start thinking about using the new standards rather than the old standards. But what if, and this is how I work, what if somebody came in to observe me for my impact rating and I was following the old standards rather than the new?
Well, our standards won't be in effect.
I understand.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
But I also understand that the fact that you're talking about history since 2016, because I'm sort of a back napper as far as history is concerned. As soon as need to know what's going on right now, then how that has something to do with history. I'm just raising a little flag as far as evaluation is concerned with teachers.
So appreciate the question, Vice President O'Leary. I think a couple of things are true in this space that it is important to name. The first of which is the Chancellor of DCPS, who of course oversees the impact system, did provide a letter of support, is excited that this work is underway. And we are excited to have his support because it means that we are much more likely to have implementation with fidelity in our DC schools. Similarly, Executive Director Walter Davis who provided the letter of support specifically for the charter schools. Next, I will name that OSSE doesn't oversee the impact system, so I don't want to pretend to provide a response about how this will be factored into the impact system, but one of the pieces that we have started working on with LEAs is what the implementation timeline will look like. And we know it will look different for different LEAs depending on the grade levels that are served. And we are excited to support LEAs in meeting their needs. That's some of the work that was started in March and will continue over the course of the summer. We know it's a space where our LEAs will need different resources, and implementation in a school that is K-2 may look different, will look different in implementation in high school. And so certainly more to come in this space to make sure their LEAs have the resources that they need. And then on our end, we are happy to support our LEAs in communicating particularly with larger systems across their systems about what that implementation timeline looks like, so they can ensure that there are no unintended consequences associated with implementing these standards with fidelity.
I'm really speaking to my colleague who's an active teacher of history. And I know that we've had the conversation, I'm not trying to help you with that, about, the new standards are following or doing things because teachers of history don't just teach about American history where they were Whigs, and we use current events to facilitate conversations about history. And I know that if I were Representative Williams, that I'd be chomping at the bit to use the new standards because I could use all the information. I know that you don't have the resources yet for that, necessarily the material resources that will come with the new standards. But I just wanted to raise that as an idea.
Very, very much appreciated, and we are keeping our LEA leaders apprised of this process. We have a meeting with them tomorrow. We'll be updating them on where we are in this process. So certainly this is not something of which our LEA leaders are not aware and excited and supported.
Thank you.
Great question.
Now, Q went to 4, so 5 Representative Henderson, 6 Representative Williams.
So I'm up. I'm very happy to see this. Thank you. I think you responded to things that I sent to you less than 48 hours ago. So thank you. And I think that I'm done sending you stuff in the middle of the night.
Should have said that.
It's not, there are things in the ancillary materials that I wanted in the standards, but can't have everything. So thank you for your responsiveness right up to the very last minute. And I do want to endorse Representative Bernstadt's comment. I think that's a good note. And Dr. Reed's switching of or to and. And you mentioned like talking about process. So I'm hoping that at the next session, we can talk about like some of like, I don't know if you have like lessons learned or like things that you want to take from this process to incorporate in future ones. I have some ideas that I'd like to contribute there. And yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Kathleen, for your ongoing work on this. I'll leave it at that.
Representative Henderson, we kind of made jokes at the beginning, but thank you for your truly deep engagement in the process. It is a great fortune to have someone with your depth of knowledge actively weighing in. I cannot speak for the entire board, but I know that you have read every single standard multiple times, and your willingness to come back to the table over and over again. It is why within 48 hours, we readily align to make sure we're responding because we appreciate your engagement. And in reflection to what will take place in July, step one, let's not wait 20 years to do this again. But we do want to come with a disciplined approach that allows the standards to breathe and then reflect on what's the right cadence to do another revision. But truly, on behalf of us and this team, thank you for your engagement.
Thank you.
All right. First, anyone who's not already asked the president. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative after. I see you, Representative, yes.
Do you want to go, Representative?
Williams.
Sure. Yeah, so I want to take a moment to kind of zoom out, kind of similar to your presentation, because I think in so many conversations with so many people over the last couple of months, we've been kind of focused on specific changes. And throughout your presentation, I was really grateful at the level of collaboration amongst everyone in this room and so many other partners that are not here today. So I think part of that to me is naming your background, Dr. Grant, and in understanding and valuing this work, having people who are writing the standards with dozens or decades of experience as classroom teachers, leadership that's willing to be able to create extra meetings that are solution oriented, staff members who are able to be so specific to be able to make these changes. And I think that level of collaboration to me was overwhelming in a great way. So I just kind of wanted to recognize that. And I think that I'm also incredibly heartened that, two of the organizations that I've worked with for over a decade, Make the Challenge and as an education project, are proud of this work. And it makes me more supportive of it. Knowing that we are being able to kind of move the ball forward with social studies education. And it's very clear that, an undertaking of this magnitude is so complex, but I'm very clear that this does represent progress. And so I'm very happy and proud of that. I have a couple quick questions. So Dr. Grant, I'm curious just to, and not to like pigeonhole you, but just kind of your general thoughts in this moment. Given that we want to moving forward, like, what do you think would be the timeline or process for revisiting things as they kind of come up? Because I know we'll learn a lot through, teachers grappling with things over the summer, and then as they're rolled out next school year. And I know we have other things kind of on the plate with financial literacy and environmental literacy. I'm just kind of curious your general thinking there.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, Andrew was like, no, so I mean, I think, at a very macro level, we should be thinking of like, what are 5-year reflection processes? We will spend an entire year building curriculum, some areas that will be brand new content. Then we will roll them out into our systems. We are going to be engaging in work on graduation requirements. We'll be looking at financial literacy standards. We will be rethinking the way our teachers are trained for literacy overall. And so we do need to give a runway to land other areas of standards that either directly impact social studies or indirectly impact social studies. And as we think about the bigger conversation of what do we want our students to be able to know, do, think, and have access to when we give them a sacred piece of paper that says they graduated from a school in our system, those conversations are all going to be in play over the next 3 to 5 years that I would say, and want to talk with leadership and want to talk with the team, that like a healthy 5-year process sounds right, might not be right, but what we want to produce for all of you is the full scope of our standards. English, social studies, math, science, and then all of the ones in between. We haven't discussed social emotional learning with this board. We haven't discussed artificial intelligence and the role we do or do not want to play in that work. And so what we want to propose in July is not just when will we look at social studies again, but this is the full arc of the standards that our children have access to. These are all of the dates with which we have updated the standards, who's on first for making those updates. And then we want to share back our thoughts on what is the right timeline to produce things. And I think what Representative Henderson said is right. We want to collaboratively reflect on, well, what went well? Because like right now, we are sitting in a moment and everybody's smiling. We're like, hey, Kathleen. But like Kathleen didn't exist 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Madison wasn't on this team. Andrew wasn't and so I think we have to name both as a state education agency and you all as a state board, the significant lift of what it means to want to revise standards. And what we did here, which was a whole standards revision. Other states, which I named, like Massachusetts, they have 60 to 80 people whose full-time job it is to revise standards, write content, reflect and process. You all have a team of 1, we have a team of 8. And so, you know, I think that's the level of reflection that I would want to have and weigh in before saying something like, we're going to do it every 5 years. Because collectively as a city, we will have to make huge investments. And what does it mean to have teams of individuals that can do this level of work? Because this work is being held together by people who are really committed to getting it across the finish line. But if any one of these pieces changes, I'd be before the board saying, I'm so sorry, we've lost our content expert, she's gone to go write a book. Or no, but I mean, but I want to be very transparent in naming that it isn't always that, you know, OXI isn't working hard enough to get something done, or state board members don't want to be collaborative. It is the fact that we need to name, if we are going to shift as a city to having an SEA that is producing standards across multiple content and being responsive in real time to shift, that is a different teaching and learning team than the one that we have now. We are fortunate that we have teachers that will come together on their free time and be compensated to write standards. We are fortunate that we have philanthropic organizations that will align national groups. We are fortunate for those things, but those things could exist if we actually just had a team of 40 people whose full-time job it was to look at our standards, make revisions, and come to you every single month and say, we want to tweak standard X because we heard feedback on immigration. We would like to also connect that to what we are learning around climate change. So that dynamism occurs when we can make different investments. And so in July, we want to start with, this is the landscape and this is our suggested timeline, but your bigger question would mean 3 to 5 people on state board whose job it is to only focus on standards and curriculum, and then an entire division at OSCE whose full-time job it is to focus on standard and curriculum, because then we wouldn't have to have summer pilots. We would, like, all of those things would be full-time jobs that people would, that would be their obsession. They would be like, all I do is this. And so that, I'm sorry, that was a long answer, but it's a bigger question than when will we look at these standards again? Like, I would be asking, like, when are we gonna make really significant investments in the amplification of the state education agency and like a policy division on your side, such that we could do bigger work faster? Because right now, it will take 3 to 5 years if we had to do this all again.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important to know and learn as to like what capacities and conditions need to exist to be able to kind of do this work, particularly as it pertains to the district. You know, we know we're unique in many ways, so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. Yeah, I guess with just the remainder of my time, that was like my big picture question. I want to note a couple of small things and then just pass the baton. So I do echo and share the concerns and suggestions of Representative Goulet, Representative Burnset, and then in a similar vein to what Representative Burnset said and Dr. Reed. The Holocaust is something that's near and dear to my heart as a Jewish American. And the first time it appears in the standards is in 8th grade. And it is listening to kind of the concern that Dr. Reed mentioned it as at least one genocide. And so there's a risk that, you know, students go through their education without having learned about the Holocaust until high school. I think one easy way to fix that would be in standard 5.44, where it's referenced to scapegoating certain groups, but it's not explicitly named. And so even if we were able to just kind of explicitly name that in elementary school, I feel like it would be a step towards greater awareness towards anti-Semitism for students to learn about in the district. So just kind of wanted to note that in my final observation of that.
I want to note, I have Representative Chang in the queue. I don't know, I don't think the only member is not Matt Plimpton. We are supposed to wrap this at 6:30. It's now 6:20. So that is my friendly reminder. I also have some thoughts, so we're gonna do our best to keep the time. I do appreciate the longer response capacity. It says me saying that. Representative Chang.
I'll keep mine short.
No, I mean,
Just want to say thank you also for responding to the feedback from school librarians in this, incorporating historiography, the focus on primary sources, and we're really, really excited about this partnership with the Library of Congress and thinking about media literacy. It is a foundational skill to include in the standards, and so thank you for weaving that thread through all of this as well.
Really appreciate that connection.
all right, my last call for new member comments. Okay. More comments than questions. Oh, well, yeah, well, first of all, the owl should not be so far away. So I just want to note that I apologize to the public because it's normally closer to the presenters. So people can hear your responses better, but I will speak up. So a couple of things I think I want to point out. So one, I'm actually really excited about the Study Research Institute. As someone who comes from or represents a board where students move a lot between LEAs, opportunities to align our LEAs is really important to making sure they have a learning trajectory that is continuous. So I really appreciate that in addition to the development of this thing with the primary resources. I was with some teachers from Kimball and Malcolm X on Monday. And one of the conversations we had was about the standards and like was there going to be a textbook for the standards? And I'm telling them there will not be a textbook or a workbook, but we are not Texas in a good way. In a good way, we are not Texas, but also in a bad way, we are not Texas. We don't dictate the market and we don't want to go buy a textbook that was designed for Texas. But things like, and what I said to the teachers, things like building out materials so that they're not starting from scratch, like there are other ways to make sure teachers are supported and aligned beyond the textbook. So that's actually really encouraging. I want to thank you for the addition of the inquiry art language for global perspective. I know this, I want to say I'm sorry for this push around making sure our young people have social studies standards that speak to a more global orientation. It's something that we're going to principles, something that has been brought up in public comment. And so I think that inquiry art is a way to say, are we doing this route? And I appreciate the quick responsiveness. And thank you to Valley Sports and others who were like, I know what this looks like, because I did not know that loud. And then I am, of course, excited about the work around the cadence of review. Vice President O'Leary hates that cadence and that schedule. But I think it's a rhythm. And so I am encouraged by that. And I know it probably does not come across as clearly, like when I started my leadership course, this is something that's coming. But I think the comments around the social studies standards, opportunity for us to think about get better, your words on capacity, I think bring that to life in a really important way to help us push for better. So thank you for those things. No, I don't know. I asked my question. Yeah, I have, so I have no questions. I know Representative Bernstein was trying to get back, I was kind of purposeful in running through my page, but I know Representative Bernstein wanted to get back in the queue. So I left some space for that.
I didn't have this earlier because I hadn't had a chance to read through this. But I just have one like comment or suggestion. I think that it would be beneficial if there was a more direct mention of either the words protest or civil disobedience in some of the standards. Right now, protest appears a few times, only once in 5th grade, and then a few times in the 8th grade action civics course, and then civil disobedience appears twice. And then direct action appears once, which can some like kind of be interpreted to be in the same vein. I think would be beneficial if there's an increased mention of that in grade 5, which is Foundations of Modern America. And then in grade, I wrote 10, it's 12, the DC history and government one. I think you don't need to add more standards, but like DC point 28 and DC point 11 are both things that I think could already have incorporated protest or resistance, or like DC point, where is it? 29, it kind of talks about this, but I think that just like very clearly using the words protest or civil disobedience could be helpful in kind of articulating those points. Like point 28 talks about the rise of Latinx-owned businesses and nonprofit organizations and the methods by which different individuals have exercised political power. There's a ton of different like protest movements that you can talk about in DC. So I think it would be beneficial to name those throughout, just so that there's kind of a clear theme from elementary to high school. But yeah, that's my only comment. Thank you.
Right. Do you understand? She is our system.
Sorry, you know, I'm a fan.
Beware in Cambridge in the fall.
Okay, they are not ready. This is a final call for any burning suggestions, comments, concerns, accolades. All right, perfect. It's 6:26, so we've done that. Reporting this is fair. Can I have a closing quick word? You sure can. What this probably do?
So I, again, thank you for this session, team, you know, really exceptional job. I'm happy you all got to meet the real Andrew. He's, we know and love. And I will name, you know, when I joined, you know, you're like, you need more teachers. Like it is, we have a lot of educators at OSSI who have taught children, who have taught this content area. And so I'm excited that you appreciate our level of enthusiasm, because, you know, we might show up in a classroom and we might want to co-teach a class with you. But I do want to name and stamp that, you know, this evening we took copious notes. We will step back and engage in like another round. But for the purposes of the board, at this stage in the process, we really will ask board members, if you have a wondering thought or a concern or something, can you please share it through the leadership? We want Madison to go into a bubble and do her last round of work. And we really do want to make sure that we can hit our June 16th deadline. Thankfully, we don't have any holidays until Juneteenth, but like our real strategy to get to the 21st is to let us take this feedback, do our last round of edits, get materials to you on the 16th so that we can be in preparation for a strong meeting on the 21st. We are aligning on communications and what will happen on the next day. We will share all of those things with leadership. It's critically important that we become one band, one sound as we shift to standards adoption. It will be a proud moment for us, but we also do want to be your supportive state education agency as you all are taking a very historic vote. And I will end with where I started, with just thank you so much for being a part of this journey. It is a professional milestone for all of our careers, and we hope that this will be like a historic moment for you all as state board members. It is, for some, a once in a lifetime vote.
I want to make sure to make before the presentation. I think the content is a question for board groups. And that is now what I'm sure will be more engagement. Send to us information to manage the train moving forward. And of course, I want to thank our staff. Because I cannot imagine we would have the quality of engagement and feedback we would have without the support given. Dr. Grant, you are welcome to attend future working session.
You know,
The invitation is saying.
we have 20-year historic votes. No, I mean,
Once in 20 years, Dr. Grant would. And so,
we will not do this. We will not take 20 years to do this again. So
well, that would be my intention as well. So because I am a fan. Progress and getting work done. And I think we have done a lot of that this evening throughout this process. The board looks forward to the votes for the meeting. And hopefully it's a little bit of a celebration of our collective victory That was perfectly timed. Perfectly timed. That is, the APA executive that reflects our hopes and our fears. So, given the alarm, which sounded, it is 6:30, and at this time, we are gonna pause the board's working session, for a 5-minute break and allow All right, so we are back from break. During our May public meeting, the board heard from students and community partners about the impact of violence, school resource officers and safe passage workers, excuse me. Representative Brandon Best will lead a discussion, help us debrief last month's panel, and identify next steps. Sorry. Have a break there. Turn it over to you, Representative Best.
All right, so thank you all for your participation in the panel. I actually wanted to, I guess kind of, I see what our pros and glows are from our last panel. So I just want to leave it at that. And I just want to open it the floor up to you all as we think about the panel. What were some of the things that you believe went well? And what are some of the things that you believe that we could possibly improve as a group as we start to build out more of these panels?
All right, we have about 20 minutes for this, so Representative Boulay, look like you were jumping
Yeah,
in.
just want to congratulate you, Representative Best, on all the work you're doing. The one thing I would say, and I don't know whether it may already be done or not, but the council and the Budget Support Act is putting together kind of a working group on these similar issues. I mean, it would be great if we could have you on there. I don't know, maybe board leadership could go suggest that to the council, but to have, since this panel, is really such a, providing such value here for us at the state board, to be able to kind of convey that also to the legislative panel, I think would be really helpful, because they're going to look at the issue, I think specifically of SROs with all sorts of different perspectives. So have the state board's perspective on there, I think would be fantastic, and you'd be a great person to be on there for us. So I don't know if that's just an idea, but something that maybe we want to look at. I appreciate that, but also, it wasn't a one-man show. So we did have other people on our panel, our team. So we had Dr. Henderson, we had Dr. Reed, who all participated, and honestly, we couldn't have done any of it without Darren. So I do love that idea of us participating with that, Fraser as well, excuse me. And so I would love, I think that's awesome. Yeah.
And I will say that I have monthly check-ins with Rajan, our chair of members and staff, and he has asked for a copy specifically of the public safety panel debrief that the committee does. So that will be shared with them after this discussion today, because they are interested and they have been following the board's involvement and work in this area.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did well was, just getting a group of people in to share very diverse opinions. I think one of the areas that we could improve in would be to make sure that we're solidifying more students early on. I think we were trying to reach out to more and grasp more students towards like right before. And so I think that one of the things that we could do is, make sure that everyone is reaching out to who they have relationships with within the schools, to ensure that we are getting students, not just students from, who are working with organizations, but just like the students who you may not typically hear from as well. So making sure that we are getting everybody's voice or a good representation, or as much as we can from students. Yeah.
The article in the paper the other day, that interviewed the students about SROs.
Yeah.
Was almost unanimous in their thinking that SROs shouldn't be in the building. And I think that what you're talking about as far as student voice is of premier importance when we're talking to the council, because they passed the SROs coming back, which to me is sort of as I mentioned in our meeting, a principal's decision from the schools. Because if you polled the principals, almost all the principals would want to have SROs in the building.
Yeah.
But the student voice in that article, which was either last weekend or beginning of the week, was really strong as far as they didn't want to have the SROs.
Yeah, I think getting that student perspective is very important. I also wonder, and I don't know if this is a bylaws issue or not. Dr. Reed brought up in our last meeting that there was one time last year that you all had a different format for one of the meetings. I don't know if you could like kind of expand on that, but it was well, instead of it being the panel, there was like a round table.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
actually Representative Thompson's idea of like utilizing different tools in our toolbox versus just always paneling.
Yeah.
Especially some of the more meaty topics where that time, the clock makes you rush, you really can't think things through, you're like forcing responses. I was just throwing out there, like, if we want to do like future conversations, maybe think about different format, since we've done 3 row shoot panels already, thinking about either doing like a round table or just acting on what people have already provided us. And then I also mentioned like visiting, instead of having students come to us and then relying heavily on our student advisory panel, which our council, which I appreciate, actually getting out to schools. I found it valuable and I'm still working on writing up notes from Anacostia and Baloo to get to the schools and hear what students are saying, because I would say, even the article that came out from the Post, some of my students were it was just interesting to hear Anacostia students and Baloo, who are right up the street from each other, have very different perspectives on what they feel about for safety. So as much as possible, we can get out there with unguided conversations and just say, we're here to listen and implement whatever you want to see was really valuable. So I guess where we can, maybe roundtable, and then if we can get into buildings or directly with student groups as much as possible.
Yeah. When Dr. Reed shared that in our committee meeting, it really resonated with me. I think for the most part, our primary way of, hearing from, our residents is like, when we have our panels. But I also wonder like what that looks like when we are, also, saying, all right, it's a yes and, where we have a panel and, as a board, maybe Dr. Reed goes to a couple places in Ward 8, Dr. Thompson goes to a couple schools in Ward 7. I know that we're all, like, some of us are doing that, but I mean, like, being very intentional about, that's it, sorry. Being, sorry, but just being intentional, I went doctor, and I was like, you know what, doctor, but you know what, here we go. However, just being really intentional about how we are leveraging our roles to expand upon like who we hear from. Because like we always say, you hear more when you meet people where they are.
Another thing that I appreciated about the panel and the subsequent conversations, how broad it was. It's not like school safety is not a SRO or no question, but there's so many factors involved, and I appreciated the breadth of the experience that was brought to the panel, and I think that's something I continue to look towards as we move forward.
The other thing about going into school building is Representative Williams and I were invited to Roosevelt State in the middle of the year, I guess, just to talk about something. But the conversation changed to, why aren't we being treated as a real school? Because, Roosevelt State moved to Garner-Patterson in Ward 1 from Ward 4. And a lot of the conversations that happened on that day started coming to our public meetings. People understood that we had a public meeting where they could voice their complaints about that. So I think that going into the buildings is something that's very important, because it gives you a real pulse of the school rather than hearsay.
I'd be interested in kind of looking at the crime statistics and the schools that are in those particular areas that have high crime areas, and kind of correlating that between the students and how they feel and getting that student voice. I know that recently we had an incident at where I worked on the day. And it had nothing to do with the school. The child was just being released for early dismissal at 1:30, and someone rolled up on them and wanted to take their shoes and their phone. And the safest place that they know to run, even though they were hit twice, once in the arm and side, was to run back into school when there was an SRO. There were violent interrupters, and there are people that can help them, that they felt most safe inside of school. So it'd be interesting to hear from students that live in areas that seem to have a higher crime rate and how they feel about, SROs, violent interrupters all in the mix. Because I think a lot of times we arbitrarily just pick students, and that can be somewhat off-putting because I think different schools feel different ways depending on what's happening in their communities.
So one of the things that I like about this conversation right now is that it's like, even though we're past it right now, which doesn't mean that we can't come back to the table with it, is that we're kind of like strategizing it. And I think that like, as we move forward, I think that there should be some like intentionality with our panels, like actually providing that strategy beforehand. Obviously, the committee, we're working on it, but like would love to also, and I could take this on saying that, as a chair of the committee, making sure that I'm reaching out to everyone to ensure that people are providing that same type of feedback and intentionality to make sure that we do get the right panel or the right group of people there to speak. Yeah.
I think two thoughts. We'll see how this goes. Thought one, I appreciate you saying that you think there should be some intentionality in reaching back. I think I'm gonna be honest, my expectation is that we are connecting things to the work we want to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's why literally I'm like, okay, so friendly reminder, tell me if there are things in your work plan so we can support you in planning a public plan. Not that that's the only thing, but I do share, I think, that both desire and expectation, that we're not just having public conversations for the sake of having them. I also think that, and I will share that, I talked to two, maybe three, of the panelists that day and then about just like, what they share, but also just like what their experience was as a panelist and like what it looks like to continue to move the conversation forward. I appreciate that they felt like it was a authentic space to engage. Because I know that in talking, like, I know some of these people, there were some people, I know people do not always accept invitations to come have public conversations because they don't think it's going to be an authentic and open space for engagement. So I appreciate us offering that space. The last, I think, suggestion I have is to go back. Like, I know we had this as a follow-up to our resolution. Like, it was like, okay, we're not going to just leave this conversation. And I appreciate the debrief today and all these suggestions, but we should also see what in that resolution continues to be actionable steps, and build on that as part of our debrief. And I think many of those things are things we can carry into this task force group, which I believe, I can't remember which deputy mayor is on the event or something, but it doesn't actually live within the council. So we'll do all the follow-up and the homework as leadership, and we're already on top of looking for the different opportunities to continue to move the board's work forward.
I think there were two more. I think it's Eric, the executive director. She can go. Okay, Jen.
I just want to say, I think that this would also be a great time for the committee to bring in our chief student advocate and to think through with them the work that they've done around student safety and student advocacy work, particularly in this area. And I think that if at all possible, avoid duplication. But if there's a way for us to leverage resources together or to hold a bigger platform with them, because they've done a lot of work with students and bringing students in, particularly over the last month of May. And I just know that they were panelists at the safety panel that the board held last year, and really being able to follow up, because that is really a really strong piece of the work that they do. And I think they can contribute a lot here and contribute a lot to the committee with just insight and resources.
I really appreciate that in a second.
So, two quick things. First of all, I don't know whether you had a chance to actually sit down and talk to the SROs themselves, but I would just encourage you to do that as part of the kind of holistic look at this. I've talked to SROs. I mean, the stories they tell are just truly amazing. Like wanting to get into this solely because they love kids, they love working with kids. And, I know a lot of stats get thrown around about kind of other programs that aren't as effective as DC, but I couldn't be more impressed than the people I talk to, who just talk about their passion for working with youth and why they wanted to get into it to keep youth safe, because it's a volunteer role. Nobody gets just put in this role. It's something people want to volunteer for and do extra training. So like just any part of it, I hope we talk to the SROs themselves. And then lastly on this, I know a lot of us were able to go to the PAVE event over the weekend. What's really exciting is PAVE, pick safe passages to school is one of their priorities. So, I think the work that they do and the oomph they provide to getting anything done would be a great partnership for your work with this committee, because they, with those voices, you get resources behind it too. And they're really looking, I think, holistically at kind of not just what's going on in the school, but then how do kids get safely to and from school? And what more do we do with that too? And that's just as important with the violence we've got going on in the city, to be able to have youth being able to get safely to school and not have to worry about some of the things that Representative Patterson talked about. I mean, I think is really important. So I just think everything's aligning for you. I'm excited for the work you're doing, and I'll be glad to help in any way I can, even though I'm not a part of the committee. Thanks. Yeah.
I just wanted to connect a few dots to the idea of going to schools and talking to students, and what Director Butler brought up. I talked to Philip Copeland, who's with the Office of the Student Advocate this weekend, and seemed like they would be interested in like partnering on those kind of visits, and I guess they do that. Anyway, they're reaching out to the schools, but I think there's opportunity for collaboration there.
Yeah. In fact, one of our next steps for our action plan that we're actively discussing would be to reach out to all of our state board reps to visit a couple of schools in your ward and have those conversations. We'll reach out to you to see kind of align on what that looks like, so we can make sure that your conversation isn't the same. I mean, isn't different than my conversation. But that is actually one of our next steps. So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Henderson. Also, thank you for being the first one to actually suggest that we do the panel. And so, the committee was able to turn this around within just a couple weeks. So I do want to say, thank you to the committee for putting in the work to ensure that we were able to do this really in a couple weeks' notice. So thanks.
I would say that your staff member is a very helpful resource.
Amazing.
Here,
Yeah.
given we did this for the governance and the going out and what it looks like to create templates and supports for that for members. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't know if you were gonna mention Morelia's work, and I know during the community report, you mentioned it, but she mentioned making sure that we have a well of students that were suspended or undocumented students, just making sure that we're also capturing the voices of a lot of different students in work like this. And also the panelists that we've had, it's not a closed door, they still want to be a part of the work of the committees.
Yeah, Morelia have a report, because she had some great.
It's in the Dropbox, and it is public, so for the committee, and I'll make a note to share that with the. Maybe it's a great report.
One thing I will say, and I know, you mentioned this, but I think in collaboration with the office, or the chief office, you know what I'm trying to say. It's important that the Office of Student Advocate, that we have conversations with students both at public meetings like the ones that we had, but also in private. Especially when we're talking about trying to reach like other students, it might not feel comfortable coming here. Like, this is not the best location to get to, especially if you're just getting off school, like 5:30 on a Wednesday might not work for you. So I think it's important that, like, especially with like other folks that we can partner with, we explore like how we can engage students in ways that isn't very public. And even if you're a student who can get here, it might just be like uncomfortable. Like, you know, as much as we try and break down the barrier, it doesn't feel like a conversation when they're sitting here and folks are up on the dais and they're looking up. It can be really intimidating. So I think it would be great to explore ways that we can engage with students that isn't necessarily like just a panel, but like, or just public testimony, which I know are sentiments that other folks have mentioned, but I just think that's really important to think about.
I think it's also really important, as you all are debriefing and we're thinking about next steps, is, and I think someone mentioned this at the public panel, is to make sure we look at the ecosystem that this issue lives in. Because it has touched mental health, in addition to like actually public safety, and looking at maybe the other resources across the district that are supporting student mental health, where they may have an opportunity. Because I just think oftentimes these things happen in silos across the district and the work is not interconnected. If there's a way, even if it's part of a landscape like scan to see and really to think beyond the traditional education and public safety realm, but what are some of the other touching points across the city and department that pieces of this work may impact the living?
I know the Office of the Student, I know we're pushing time on this section, but it is what it is. I feel like we accomplished a lot with the being on time with Aussie, so less pressure is on. But not really. But I know the Office of Student Advocate has already done some of that work. And this is one of the reasons I said it might be helpful to go, I like second your suggestion as far as going back to them is a huge resource, but also going back to like the resolution from before, because it actually does point to both like areas in our city where people are using multiple approaches, like a public health approach, and they should be, and we should look to what we should connect with. It is much, what they were able to contribute was much more than a conversation about, do I want this or do I want that? It really was a look across to say, what are things we can do to improve safety for youth, period. And I very much value the work that they've done in that perspective and being able to build on that. All right, well, I'm gonna echo Representative Best, thanks to all the members for their input and of course for the staff in supporting us. And both getting the panel done, but all the ways you prepare us for these discussions. We definitely look forward to hearing how the school community and working committee will be building on this work, in addition to how the full board can support and continue to be engaged in it. Next on our agenda, we're moving to committee reports. So each committee chair or co-chair will have at most, let's do 3 minutes to share, 2 minutes for questions. Committee report outs go in alphabetical order of the committee. So we are going to start with the admin committee. Vice President O'Leary.
Good afternoon again. We had a last 2 weeks full of admin committee reports and meetings. The Office of the Student Advocate hosted a student leadership summit on May 30th. It was well attended. There were several watch parties, and the student advocate, Dan Davis, is going to share the video of that meeting with us. So you'll get that in your inbox soon. The SBOE core office team has onboarded new staff members. You all have received this report, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. We've already been introduced to our new team members. We had we reviewed a request from the ombudsman, for a pay increase. We talked about that. It's in the notes. You can read about that. The committee discussed board oversight of the three offices, the state board, OSA, the Office of the Student Advocate, and the Ombudsman's Office, the budgets, and the need to align our understanding of who has what oversight authority. All right, that was a big part of our meeting the other day. To talk about standard operating procedures in all of the offices. Student representatives Washington and Jones Burgess are going to represent us at the Aurora Institute Conference on Student Well-Being in Palm Springs, California, which it should be well-being headquarters. The committee agreed to engage with NASB to begin a conversation around an agency-wide strategic plan as part of our membership benefits. That would bring the offices together to talk about what our strategies are, what the standard operating procedures should be. And we also invited OSA and the Ombudsman's Office to join our retreat in the fall. Executive Director Butler has been charged with talking about to NASB about the strategic planning resources, and we will follow up with the bylaws committee on the next steps for our SOPs, and all of that is in the report. Any questions? Seeing none, I'm done.
All right, I am actually gonna go to the bylaws committee. Representative Glenn.
Fantastic. So I sent everybody the latest draft just before this meeting. I think substantively, we're 95% of the way there, maybe 99% of the way there. What President Thompson said, we're going to get that up on SharePoint so everybody can add to it. I'm going to do 3 cleanup things tonight. I'm heavily caffeinated at this point, so I plan to stay up until it's done. There's 3 things I want to do. I'm going to proofread it one last time because I'm sure there's something that I missed in there. I'm going to update the numbers. So the last thing you do is you update the numbers on it because I got to align those and match them up with the crosswalk. And then Representative Burns said, I didn't get your language in there yet for the Student Advisory Committee, so I'm going to put that in. What I can do then is it'll be up on SharePoint. Everybody will be able to see it and amend it. I want to definitely work with both of my committee members on this, have conversations. And then also I want to talk with our executive director because some of the dates in there, I mean, just to me seem like either they're duplicative language or they may even contradict each other. I'm not sure. So I want to make sure that that process is smooth in there with you. What I would shoot for, assuming that my members are available, and I apologize that we tried to set this up last week and I just had, all sorts of things come up, would be shoot for June, like 15th or 16th to try to mark this up out of our committee. What that would then allow us to do would be to put a draft of our committee mark of this on the website. The public could view it and then they would have a chance to testify at the June 21st public meeting that the board has, which would be great. Now our committee sunsets on the 30th, but that would be fine because I think we can finish our work up the 15th or the 16th, assuming you both are available to do it then sometime. And then it would then go to the admin committee next. So it would go to your committee, I think, after that, which would then give an opportunity, assuming we've given you a good product, to have it at the next working session, which would be the July 5th session, and then a final vote on the 19th. So I think we've got, hopefully a process in place to get this done. I really just want to thank my committee members for their patience with me. I had all sorts of stuff coming up, but I think we've got this almost to the finish line. And once we get it up on SharePoint, I'd love to talk to every member and see what you want changed with it. And I'm glad to work on it this weekend to get your changes in there. But the hope would be that what we bring to the committee and the committee approves includes everybody's feedback and everything that you all want to see in the final version of the bylaws. So I'll do the cleanup tonight. We'll have it on SharePoint and then have at it. Let me know what you think about it.
I did not hear ask for questions, but are there questions or comments? Yeah, I do want to give a disclaimer, and I should be represented like the dates. We'll double check and make sure all the dates can work, because there's scheduling that will happen, needs to happen to make that true. Okay. School, community and well-being, back to you, Representative Best.
All right, so in our meeting, we discussed our overarching student. Yeah.
Alphabetical order.
Oh.
Sorry. School comes before student.
Sorry, it was just, that's the way it was on my.
I know.
So we went over our overarching projects, which which we were able to break down to 3 topics: school safety, mental health, and healthy schools facilities network. We talked about our goals and grows, similar to what we just did with you all. We had Morelia speak as she shared her school safety work. She shared input on safety while providing us with tips to make sure that we're reaching out to students, like Darren said, who are not the students who we typically hear from. During our meeting, we were also discussing making sure that we align on what school safety means. But we also, when we were talking to Morelia, she also made sure that we were being student centered. And so making sure that we're actually asking our students, well, what does school safety actually mean to you? From there, we discussed the seizure safe schools resolution and then concluded from there.
Questions? Comments?
Yes, so once I know the staff and that is working on and drafting the seizure safe resolutions, seizure safe schools resolution. I do think another piece of the work will then be making sure that we have language to go to council, just because there's a different ask for that legislation. So that if that's not already a step to take the resolution that they get council ready. I think it would be appropriate to add here.
Thank you.
Right, hearing and seeing no others, you were not forgotten. But next action would be next will be students, right? No, it's state level. Okay. State level and systemic policy. I think I'm coming to Representative Patterson because I'm missing your co-chair. Okay.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Madam President. We did not meet this month, so we have a report that we need to report out on. We are scheduled to meet this coming month, which will be worked out with Kathleen.
Perfect. I'm assuming there aren't questions about that. I think that's fair. I don't see any movement. I will make a comment. The upcoming public meeting is on not so much introvert attention by itself, like the problems or challenges of seizure attention, but it is a panel which came out of some of the suggestions from the committee to talk about what it would look like to solutions oriented to support and retain teachers. So that is just a flag that would hopefully help support this community's work.
Yes.
I mean, this committee's work.
And I would just add that as you all are meeting in your June meeting, is to spend some time focused on the work plan, because obviously has shared with us. And the message like, so are you definitely having your meeting in July? Because these are the things we plan to bring, and both of those things fall here. Report card and financial literacy.
Favorite thing, report card.
So they are well prepared to start in July, so just to make sure that those things are discussed as a part of the work plan and next steps.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Student advisory committee.
The student advisory committee met once in May. We met with people from the Truth Initiative to talk about DC specific initiatives. They work with ending the use of tobacco and vapes and things like that. We also talked to Aussie about the social studies standards, which we'll talk about more at the public meeting earlier this month. The last SAC meeting of the year is on June 12th. I won't be there, but they'll be celebrating the graduating seniors and reviewing the annual report, which needs to be reviewed, or which needs to be approved by the board, but it's basically just everything we've done this year. It's not very floral or anything. And then this will be in new business in just a second, but the SAC application and the application for student members are out. So I ask that you share those on Twitter, you can share that on social media networks. And it's really important that you're gonna get information on like how you select student representatives. I just encourage you to really think about what you think goes well with student representatives, and how you plan on maybe supporting student representatives that come in the following years to help them be as successful and comfortable as possible.
Questions, comments?
So for the June meeting, just to be clear, November, if there is an SR, they need four that should be on the ballot for June, they should probably make their way to the meeting on Monday.
Yeah, if there is a resolution that you want passed in the June public meeting, it has to come in front of the SAC. So you have to reach out to Malayo and CC China on that email so that they can put it in the schedule. That has to be done by Friday. If it is not done by Friday, it is not getting voted on in June because they are not going to add anything to the schedule on Monday. So you should also come prepared. You don't need to like present anything, but you should let Malayo know that you're going to be like, that you want the resolution printed out. We need about 30 copies for a meeting. And I'm just sharing information because I won't be there, so I cannot share that information. We need 30 copies for a meeting. You need to just explain what the resolution is. You don't have to read it verbatim, and then take any questions or comments folks have, and then you have to step out of the room so we can vote on it. Because this is kind of more of a celebratory meeting, anyone is like welcome to join us for that meeting. Seniors are going to be getting their stoles and their little certificates. But yeah, that's everything you need to know.
And that's Monday.
That's Monday the 12th, from 5 to 6:15, maybe 6:30, depending on how long the schedule that is.
It's down the hallway.
It's that room at the end of the hall, most likely. Sometimes it's in here, but we're the only ones up here. You'll find us.
Or here. And I would just say, when you reach out to Malayo, staff will already have the draft resolution. So if you are working on a resolution, your staff member can provide that text. I would just include them in the email to Malayo to make sure that that gets out to members. You don't have to worry about printing before. The staff will take care of that, working with Malayo to make sure the student representatives and the members of the student advisory council have the materials.
Okay, I mean, these 5 o'clock starts are killing me here. So is there any, like, how does it work with your agenda? Representative Burnstead, is the, like, if like we're there later in the, like, when do we need to vote on the resolutions?
That's not up to me for this meeting.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to be there at all. Typically, we try to work with people on a first come, first served basis. So like, you know, if you get to us last minute, then you're just gonna get whatever slot is left. But the beginning is gonna be celebratory. We normally don't start till like 5:10, 5:15 anyways. So you have some grace there, but you definitely cannot start presenting like after 6 o'clock because that's when everything is winding down and folks have to start heading home. We have to, like, we'll hear each resolution separately, vote on them, give comments on them, and then repeat the process over again. So it's not just one time where we vote, it's just after we hear each resolution.
And the requirement is that the resolution be presented. So let's say, I'm gonna pick on you, Representative Poulet. Let's say Representative Poulet, you're like, this 5 o'clock start is killing me. I know I'm not gonna make it by leave time. You could identify another member. No, you didn't need to talk with that member to present on your behalf. I'm specifying member and not staff because members need to be able to get the background on the opinions and the why it's coming before the board in a way that is different than the staff. So it does not have to be, it's not like, okay, like it has to be the same people over and over again, but there has to be a member that presents, so we can then have the opinion of the SAC taken into account with the vote.
And it can't be a student member, so you cannot ask China to present.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes. thank
yeah,
you.
you got me. That was what I was thinking.
And elected members, and elected members, yes.
I'll make it work, Madam President. We'll get it done.
And like I said, let me know, let
I'll
us,
make
let
it
us
work.
know. We are members.
I'll be
they're
there.
members. All right.
Oh, and CC me on the email, please, just in case.
All right, I believe that is our final committee report. We will resume the external committee reports in July. Once all the members, some of you may have already received like introductions from staff saying like who's the person in contact. I know some people are still waiting on that. So we'll go back to external committee reports in July as far as all the committees. I do want to ask if anybody had, like, some of them have been continuous, so like, anybody have anything? If not, then we'll resume those in July. Next, new business and other discussions. So before we start our discussion on new business, we're gonna do something, I guess, a little bit different and a little bit celebratory, since representing firms that will not be at the meeting, at her SAC meeting. So she should come to the front because we have something for her. So Executive Director Butler mentioned that we have a
That's
celebratory
awesome.
close for graduation. We wanted to make sure we got yours. In a time.
That is awesome.
A speech,
Graduation.
30 seconds.
Can you show this bowl a little more?
If I can sit down, maybe.
Well, while you're thinking about the speech, so we should say, we are incredibly thankful for your service and proud of all your accomplishments. And so we, of course, are grateful to have served alongside you, and your voice and leadership has genuinely shaped our conversations as well as public education policy in the district. So no big deal. But we did want to take this moment to celebrate you while you were here with us. So thank you, Representative Bernstead.
I'm very sad about leaving. I'm really excited actually to be done. This has been a long 2 years. Like, I could not, I don't know how Alex did 2.5. This is good for me. But I'm very grateful to have joined the board. I applied once and didn't get it, and then I applied again. You know, I was being very persistent. It has definitely helped me throughout life. Just like, I don't know, doing stuff like this gives you like actual life skills that are transportable and makes you feel a lot more hopeful sometimes about things. Sometimes it does the opposite, but like that's whatever. And you know, I still have like the August, like July is my last public meeting. August I have a working session, so I'll still be around and working on student advisory committee, standing operating procedures. And you know, I'm always here to support next year's student representatives. I don't know, I'm very grateful for everyone and I'm very sad to be leaving, but I'm ready for what comes next. And you know, maybe Williams has some competition in 4 years. We'll see, I don't know. But thank you very much.
You are welcome. We're not kicking you off, and we're not saying you can't come to any of those things, but we are saying we wanted to make sure you had your stall in time for graduation.
Oh, I'm so excited. I was gonna have to come here and I was like, I'm not making the trip down here before graduation.
All right. So next, not as fun. But we are actually really gonna do new business now. So I want to ask members if they have any additional items of new business to add to the following list. The overview of the Student Advisory Committee and Student Representative Selection Process. The July working session discussion, that'll make sense in a minute. As the SRs on OSSI busing, seizure safe schools, and approval of the social studies standards. Are there any additions to that list? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would like to propose that we consider drafting resolutions on artificial intelligence, academic standards on artificial intelligence, and I can share that later on.
All right, anything else? Going once. Going twice. We are going to start new business. All right, so overview of the Student Advisory Committee and Student Representative Selection Process. I hope that presentation inspired a wonderful presentation to come. Executive Director Butler.
Absolutely. So right now, our student advisory committee members and student rep application is live. That application has been open since May 15th. It will close on June 15th. It is our staff's goal to get 2 members. Because you all will then get to, there's an option on the application if you want to be considered for a student rep position. We pull all of those applications who have checked that box. Other than looking at the members for the student advisory committee, we don't say no unless we run out of space. Because we don't want to turn students away, because these are really great students who show up relentlessly on schedule and on time. And so we encourage them to apply. But there are only 4 slots on the board for student representatives. And so for all of those applicants who have checked that box, the board, the staff compiles a spreadsheet of their application responses, which includes why you want to be considered for student rep and other things about their experiences they're hoping to achieve. And there's a rubric where you get to vote. And you get to rank and identify 4 students who you would like to have on the state board. Looking back at the information that was shared last year, there's a requirement that 1 come from east of the river. But the goal has been have 2, the practice, I guess that would be to say to have 2. And so, but I think what we also want to consider in making our student representative appointments is to really question and maybe think about, even if we narrow it down to a group of 8, maybe have some virtual interviews to have students to ensure the students are really going to be engaged. I think it is really important to have 4 that are active, so the workload isn't sitting just on 1 student, and it is shared equally. So if there's an additional staff potentially, so that we can do that vetting in July. The goal is to get this to you after Juneteenth holiday, which is the 20th of June, so that you have between June 20th and our working session meeting, which we decided that's the 5th or 6th later on, for you all to complete those assessments, and then we can begin scheduling interviews and like informing people of their selection to move to the next round. And the goal is to have this finalized and the student pick before August, so that then we can schedule their onboarding. Like, I think learning from the experiences this year with our student representatives, it was really important that we be intentional about how we onboard them, similar to how we onboarded new members this year in a way we had not done in the past. So making sure there's time for the wonderful SOPs that Representative Bernstein is putting together, and we can review all of that and give them best practices, set them up for success, and really lean in to support them as they start the new year. And if there's some time for us to do that, you know, before the school year starts, at the beginning of the school year, we want to do it so that they feel more comfortable being in these spaces and being able to show up and advocate and engage with the rest of the members of the student advisory committee.
Okay.
Can you send us something we can put out on listservs for this with a link right to the portal then?
Yeah.
Okay, you may have already done that. And then we can tweet it out as well. And then is there requirements on what year the kids have to be going into? They have to be
At
juniors
least a
and seniors?
sophomore and above. We don't
Okay.
take very many freshmen who haven't been in high school yet.
Okay, all right, great.
Questions, comments? Yeah, Representative Bernstein.
One thing I would note, this is not about like selection, and I mentioned this before, this year was a weird year because student reps came in September-ish, and then there was a new board in January. So we didn't have time to like fully get to know everyone, and then people came in when there was already student members. But one of the things that I think would be helpful, and I started virtually, so this was like a totally different playing field, is like if there's a student representative, not even from your ward, but just like, I think it would be great if everyone reached out to student reps and offered to have time to like talk with them after and make sure that they're kind of acclimated to the board well, because I know that that can be kind of a difficult process for a lot of students. It's really nerve-wracking. So I think that one of the ways that we keep students engaged throughout the entire term is making sure they know, like, you know, all the elected members of the board are very responsive, and I think they really care about the work of student representatives. But it can seem really hard to enter that space because it's all adults, so I think it would be great, if moving forward, we can make sure that there's communication that seems like a little more colloquial, a little less like formal, to make sure students feel supported and encouraged to stay throughout the year, even if they're not from your ward. Yes.
Are there any resources available to students to help them like get to meetings? Like travel reimbursement or anything like that?
Well, if they are traveling on the metro, then they should be able to use their card. I would say, as someone who has representatives in my ward often, I tend to be the travel resource. So like I will, literally, I stay and wait and make sure they have a ride home. Because I don't want to walk up the hill from the metro. And I don't want them to have to do that. So like technically, public transportation is covered. But we don't have something in addition, which would be like a ride. And so I think to Representative Burnstead's point about like just reaching out and making sure people have certain resources. A lot of times as an adult, we can do those resources.
But I would also say, even as members and as employees of the district, for work-related travel, the city will reimburse. So even if you take an Uber or something, the city will reimburse you.
Well, yeah, but there's caveats to that. So like not from your home address or something.
Yeah, but if they're coming
from school
or they're leaving, yeah.
Yeah, like it's done.
I have one more note separate about this. One thing that I think would be really helpful is when you share this information out. So like, Executive Director Butler said, anyone can be on the student advisory committee. And I think that's a great thing to note, especially like you can mention there's no writing requirements. You don't have to get a letter of recommendation. You don't have to get any of these things. And just like explicitly saying that, because for student members of the board, there's a lot of questions you have to answer. And sometimes students can feel like a lot of times when we're doing like applications for stuff, it feels like it's going to be like a lot of labor. But it would just be great if in your communication, you can make it clear that like anyone is welcome to join.
One question that one of the current student reps asked me was like, do they have to reapply? The answer is technically yes. Because it's a one-year term. And so again, to Representative Burnstead's point, it might be a good time to reach out to some of our current representatives to encourage them to continue their service. Given how wonderful they have been so far. Other questions, comments, discussion? All right.
How many,
Yes.
how many of the student representatives are seniors?
On the state board.
Huh?
So I'm the only like student member on the board, and the committee,
No,
there's
I'm talking
12.
about the committee itself.
There's 12, so they're about a quarter of the committee, slightly more.
Thank you.
Oh, stay one more time. All right, I'm gonna move to the next item. July working session. So, the 4th of July holiday is coming. We have a working session scheduled for July 5th. We, of course, approved our schedule at the beginning of the year like we always do. And we have to have a quorum. So, members, I need to know, are we gonna have a quorum on July 5th? Or do we need to consider another meeting date as of possibly July 6th? Why am I suggesting July 6th specifically if this is an issue? Because the following week, there is actually a state board requirement that we participate in the Education Commission of the states, which means I cannot move it a week. But if we will all be here, or many of us will be here July 5th, then we can stop there. I just need y'all to tell me the truth. So we can get our work done. Discussion. Presence? Yes. Okay, perfect. Moving on. Okay, that was easy.
That solves another problem.
I just want to make sure. SR on RC busing, Representative Goulet.
Thank you so much. And if anybody's looking for what to do on the fourth, day before that, come to the Palisades Day Parade, and let's march. So let's do it. Yeah, I want to just thank Dr. Darren Fleischer for everything he's done on this with me here. We've gotten a resolution together really that I think reflects all the great things the ANCs have done on OSSI busing. We've written in a way though where it's a little bit less contentious. I mean, we have OSSI is our sister agency, I think, but this year has been a struggle with the special education transportation program. Looking back in 2012, we were able to get out from court oversight. Gilmore was the transit administrator. I mean, he was hitting around 95%, on time completion for these routes. OSSI reminded me though, they have made great strides since January and up to, they said 95% on time routes. However, what I wonder a bit is how much of the improvement is due to the hiring fairs they've done, the incentives that they've put forward versus the fact that your sick rate is going to be far lower now than it would be, in January when we were really hitting numbers that were problematic. So what I would like to see is I'd like to see us pass something that, takes all the great ideas the ANCs have put out, builds upon that, and then, presents this to OSSI as I think something that we want to check back up on to make sure that when the fall starts, the issues we saw this year aren't replicated again. I don't know about anybody else, but I've had a lot of outreach from parents on this issue in Ward 3 that have just expressed concern about the disruption their family faced this year with students, either missing school or parents having to scramble and get their kids to their educational setting. I think the resolution, I think we got a lot done on it. I think, have we shared it yet on SharePoint? Okay, well, we'll share it with all of you just so you can see it. But basically it requests them to make certain changes. And I'm going to sit down and talk with OSSI beforehand about this just to make sure we've reflected everything fairly in there. But I think this is one of the most important things that we can do, because if this goes back into court receivership, not only does the district lose autonomy of a program, but it's going to cost a lot more. And it's just not the way you want city programs run. You want them to be successful, but you want it to done through local control. So I'm glad to take any questions on it. We'll share the resolution with people. If you want to send me edits to it, I'm glad to take them. And I'm going to talk to some of the parents who've been involved in this issue over the weekend, just to make sure we get their feedback as well. And is it appropriate for me to just turn to Darren and see if he wants to add anything to that? Can he help me with it? Get it ready? Or-
I think it would be helpful. I know we will be sending out follow-ups following the working session. We actually will have a draft of all the resolutions, and we'll send them to everyone when we send out the follow-up to this meeting.
Okay, great.
I don't know if it's helpful for the OSSI busing resolution. Some people may have seen what Ward 3 agencies have put together, but some people may not have at this point. So would it be possible, Darren, if like this, at least the skeleton of what they're working on can be emailed to the members in case there's any, like now,
Yeah.
in case there's any questions that you want to get on the table at the moment?
Yeah, right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we're pretty much done with it. We can
Yeah,
put it up
it
there.
doesn't-
even.
So I will say the goal of the working session is not perfection. It's working. And so I would, yeah. So Darren, if you could send it, that way people can have a moment to respond. Maybe it would be helpful so people could read it.
And I can walk people through it if it would be helpful.
Is the goal for a vote in June? Yeah.
So I'm gonna give Darren a chance to do that. Is it okay if I move to the seizure safe schools one, something that is in the packet? Seizure safe schools.
None of us.
So Darren, could you send the OSSI one I feel like for the Seizure Safe Schools Month, we had the testimony, which I believe is what it's built off of. So we can use testimony for discussion. And then we actually do have this social studies language. I apologize because it's kind of helpful. So here's why I'm pushing for things to be in front of people. It is helpful when people can look and then raise certain things so that we can have time to make any feedback or adjustments. Just like we do with our sister agencies, we can do that with our members.
Clarifying question, just history from the board. If there's something in the resolution that just requires more discussion, like how is the board planning to do that? So for instance, like I might give feedback based on what I see via email or something. Yeah, I feel like a couple of these topics might be a little more meaty than like a email review.
Which one specifically? So like, I think we'll
I
discuss.
gotta see it
I think,
first. Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons we're gonna discuss now, and I think we literally use the working session to make those decisions. I'm not gonna blanketly say we're gonna like move all of them or, but I am asking for a bit of grace in the timing, just to like make the adjustments to the agenda. And so if it's okay, so Darren can get that to everybody. I want us to move to the Seizure Safe Schools and we can work from the testimony, which you all already have access to. Why am I saying you already have access to it? Because it might be helpful for people. I see everybody with their computers open. Literally, you can go to the file where the testimony is shared, version you share with me. Because they literally, the testimony from, and I can't remember, Representative Beth should do a better job, but from your constituents, literally said, these are the things that should be in Seizure Safe legislation, which would then is the content that will be translated to the resolution so we can discuss the topic, even though we already heard the testimony. And then if there are tweaks to language, we can definitely do that via email or online, but at least we are working from the same content.
They shared some of it. They didn't share the full thing. I think I talked about it. I can send an email with the five
With the link, yes.
components.
Let's do that now.
And then I just wanna,
You just do another week.
just in the draft.
Yeah. Okay, Bernice, Representative Butter, Executive Director Butler is going to send everybody the drafts.
Thank you. I just want to add to Mike, when we talked in the committee, mentioning a couple points from the, like, yes, Seizure Safe Schools got it, but there was a couple of glaring points related to what the professionals, nursing professionals can do in the building was a little interesting to hear back from. And then something else I think I was mentioning, similar response to like allergy training. Yes, because I mean, it's the same sort of protocol, and I know schools have done both trainings at the same time to get your check for. So yeah, I just want to say that because I do want to plug that into the resolution. That's interesting though.
I sent something out on April 6th, but I'm gonna forward that. I'll reply all to everyone to bring it back up to.
I was like, this is stuff you have, like, it's good in front of people. All right, so Darren has already shared, Dr. Darren Fleischer has already shared Representative Beth's resolution. So if you want to check their emails for that now, that's what we'll start. Executive Director Butler is sharing the other two. So after we discuss Seizure Safe Schools, we go back to the Austin busing resolution. And then we will leave the social studies resolution in its place, and we can start the discussion on the AI, because that is a new topic, so there is nothing. That we're in front of you today. So, Representative Best, do you wanna give a voice over while people are pulling that up?
Yeah, sure. Hold on, let me just pull it up. So, as you all know, we've had a couple of people talk about seizure safe schools legislation. One of the things with this is it has 5 major components. One, requiring school personnel to complete seizure recognition and first aid response training. My thoughts are they could probably take that at the beginning of the year when they take first aid. Mandating that a seizure action plan is made part of the student's file and made available to school personnel and volunteers responsible for the student. Ensuring that any FDA-approved medication prescribed by the treating physician is administered to the student living with epilepsy. Education and training students about epilepsy and first aid response. Initiating a Good Samaritan clause that offers legal protection to anyone who gives reasonable assistance to those who are believed to be injured, ill, or otherwise incapacitated. I also provided another link with additional information. But the thought is that our resolution would mirror those 5 components as well.
All right, so, thank you, Representative Best and, Darren, for the information. I'm gonna open it up, for discussion, and questions. All right, I saw Representative Blaze hand first, I saw, Vice President O'Leary's hand second, and then I see, Representative Reed.
Representative Best, I just want to thank you for doing this, fully supportive of it. Just wanted to ask, are we attaching then the legislation to the resolution as well? Like, are we going to transmit on behalf of the board, the legislation ourselves, or are we going to look for a council to introduce? What's your thoughts?
So I've already spoken with a couple members of council who would be willing to introduce if we have a resolution and some language to support.
My recommendation for the resolution is to include language that calls on the council to act, and then we would transmit to council. We can also include in the resolution a date to transmit that. I think you were next, Representative. Vice President O'Leary.
I'm gonna leave it with Representative Reed, because I have a feeling that what I'm thinking about is what she's thinking about. And she brought it up before.
Let's see we're on the same wavelength. Okay, so, yeah, I think I need to look at the letter that I drafted toward the end of last year. So the busing resolution is titled equitable access to bus services. So yeah, special education for sure is the issue. In those buses, but also thinking more broadly about how do we use our buses in the
I'm
city.
sorry, we're talking about seizure safe.
Oh, shoot, okay.
Schools.
Teacher safe schools, my bad. Go ahead.
Oh, the reason
You were not.
obviously the wavelength was not quite there, but the reason I did bring it up, because Representative Reed brought it up at another meeting about not only epilepsy, but other allergic kind of reactions. And I was wondering am I wrong about that, Representative Reed?
You're correct, yeah.
And I thought that was a really good point, because like we have a lot of athletes have to have their inhalers, or they have to have on their forms they have that they can take an EpiPen or whatever. And I'm just wondering if that is that watering it down too much?
I want to make sure that like when we look at this, it's like addressing a specific issue for a specific challenge, and not saying that, when you say like other, but when you do say other, it doesn't actually identify what that other is. And so like what I want to make sure is that, when we're talking about the requiring personnel to complete like the seizure recognition, and first aid response training is specifically for that issue. Now, I definitely believe we should be thinking about what are those other things, but I just wonder how we include that in something that's so specific that is saying like, we want to make sure that we are ensuring that, part of this is one, ensuring that any FDA approved medication prescribed by a treating physician is administered to students living with epilepsy, right? So it's like being very specific to that. Now, if we take away all the epilepsy specific language and that where we're completely opening it up, then I think it does defeat the purpose of providing something that's so specific and so targeted, which individuals from the community are saying that there is no response to that right now.
And Representative Beth, I was actually thinking like, yes, keep your very specific language and maybe insert like 2 clauses at the bottom of like, there are similar responses, like the response to allergic reactions. They're almost very similar to your response to like some of the seizure in regards to like who you're gonna call, that kind of thing. So just like 2 maybe clauses on the bottom of your seizure safe resolution of saying like, and we encourage the district to explore how other emergency medications are administered, that kind of thing. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Keep that pure about seizures, but there are other things that it seems like our schools are missing out on with how they administer emergency medications. And I worked at a school that literally would do an hour training where we knocked out inhaler, seizure, and every year,
I think that doesn't water it down by having like that language at the bottom. So yeah, I would be open to that. I think that as long as those 5 major things are there, and that we're not like taking away from, the intent of this, then I think that's fair.
Representative Henderson, Representative, and then back to Representative Boulay. I don't see new hand. Okay.
So on the school personnel, who are we including on that? Like, do we want to have that include like athletic staff or like after school, anything of that?
So when we had our conversation, I think one of our residents, she was very firm on saying anyone who has contact with students, because we don't know when the seizure is going to be triggered and who's going to be around. And so the goal is to ensure that everyone actually has that training so that all school personnel or all school staff would have that, receive that training.
So just, here's a couple of recommendations and then a thought on it. So before we put this out there, we may want to just bump it past the Department of Health and then possibly the CPS, like staff within those entities, just because they may think of things that we just might not be thinking of. I mean, it's helpful. I would always try to do that when I would introduce legislation, is kind of shop it over to like Department of Health first, because they may catch something, just to improve it even more than what we have. And, an idea on it, like, I love the fact that we have the power to introduce legislation as a body. I mean, you may have already, talked to members that got commitments on this, but I think it would be with something that's really positive like this, that, I think something everybody can support, to think about, possibly approving this as legislation that would then be sent on behalf of the board. Because I know we've done that before. We did it with legislation before. So if that's a power we have, I think we should use it, and and then we can send it on, and then like you or our our president or executive director could testify on behalf of the bill before the council, and it just kind of ups our presence. So just a thought. You may already have a different strategy, but I like the idea that we can introduce legislation.
Other thoughts? Let's see. I think that's there. Okay.
One other thing that came up during the public witness testimony was the stigma around epilepsy, and just at least in the resolution, but also, like you said, every rose like me. Representative Reed, President Reed, oh yeah, please. But making sure it's an actionable item and that there's follow through, but finding some way for teachers to be aware of that stigma, or like those that bias with students.
It might be a helpful next step. I'm gonna ask the staff to double check this, but I don't. Excuse me, Christian, thank you. We can pass a resolution calling for the transmittal of legislation. And if this is like the core of the resolution, plus some of the suggestions we have from members, my assumption is that would be sufficient language for the resolution. And then if you will be amenable, and if others think it is also a helpful next step to also just reach out to like DC Health and others, we can then include that in preparation for the transmittal package to council of the legislation. Because
Makes
then we
sense
can
to me.
say the board,
Yeah.
and that way it goes to the chairman, which tends. So. All possible avenues forward. Other thoughts? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna take us back to the OSCE question, which is now in your email. Representative Lay. You are ready for you.
Already talked a lot about this. If people got questions based on what they can now see in their email, send them to me. Darren and I worked on this together today. We get it ready.
Thank you all for that. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Reed.
All right, I think I'm on topic this time.
All right.
For busing, I know the amendment, the resolution is titled, as equitable for the transportation, equitable access to bus services. And I know we're heavily focused on, the special education element of this. We've also had issues with busing related to, the field trip, situation, and then that had spin-off questions. I have some points that you're interested in adding in relation to, like, yes, you want us to address the issues with special education busing, but there's some bigger overarching issues with busing that I know the superintendent Grant mentioned last time, we were looking at last meeting, they're looking at like, how can they, use buses in a more innovative way. So I like to kind of like document that spirit, like in this resolution of like, how do we even look at how the students get access to like field trip transportation, access for after school activities, out of school time activities, just so that we can kind of like knock this issue of busing out, or not knock the issue out, but like have a more encompassing conversation related to busing outside of, yes, special education space, because we have students who need buses for a variety of reasons. So if you are open to that, I will send you some of the things that we were talking about last year.
I mean, not only am I open to it, I'm excited about it. I mean, my knowledge base is really just in the special ed transportation, but I would love to work with you on kind of getting a more holistic picture of how we could more creatively use our buses and then circulating the revised draft. So I'd love to work with you on getting that in here too, and then having a more complete resolution. So excited to work with you on that, Representative Reed.
Send me your ways.
I have two thoughts. My first thought is about going back to Ms. Corbett and her son's testimony about the times. That was actually specific to this issue, and like that window of time. And so I would hope for that to be addressed. I want to think about what Representative Reed is suggesting, just because I probably know a little bit too much about the logistics
And I know that we have buses that like literally just like go sit with certain students because we're sending them to Virginia and other different places. So I don't know. I want to present solutions that can happen, not that sometimes will cause more problems and like letting our schools down. Because now they think they can depend on these areas of transportation and people are eager to say, yes, I will help, and they won't, since that's very different from how we currently contract buses. I know like Eastern have reached out to me because they were let down more than once in getting their van places. But I actually think that's it's a different issue. While I do think the Aussie bus fleet probably could be helpful, I also want to just think about how we're not over committing them and then they're a hindrance and we're still letting schools down. I'm just asking for space to like, I'm asking for help in how to consider that. Because I don't want to give the impression that like they drop off students, the buses are just sitting on lots, they can be used for field trips. And then, because that's not really how it works. Which would also get back to your point about like, if we're not picking up students on time, then we end up with receivership, like, yeah.
I mean, then you can name it just like special education, because like you want to narrow it down to just that issue, I'm fine with. But I also think that it is up for us as well to be innovative and put on the table of like innovative solutions. It doesn't mean that the universe has to be ready to accept it right now, but we can put out there like, here's what we're thinking. And in support of, I know Superintendent Grant is thinking innovatively about how we bus, even though it might not be the current state of affairs.
Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
I would just actually like the part about the electronic payment and really updating that system. And I think that it's important that you actually also name like the OCFO as a part of that solution. And so I'm glad that that language is in there. To show that it's almost like a shared thing that they have to do together. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate that.
And I'll commit to also calling some parents up over the weekend, just to make sure we haven't missed anything on this, because they could have some, tweaks to the language too, but I'll be glad to work with President Thompson and Representative Reed, on that language. Maybe we can get some of it in, or maybe we'll want to do it as a separate resolution, but I'm flexible on it.
And just one additional thing, leadership meets with us on Monday as a part of our monthly meeting. And so, we'll try to, if you share this, I can share it before as a part of our agenda, so that they'll have it for us to discuss and can share your feedback. I mean, you can always follow up with them separately, but I just want to let you know that we can also share it in that way with them.
And just one last thing on this side, we gotta move on. I don't want to pile on OSSI with this resolution, but I think one of the things that's important that we lay out is we can't have, they got caught by surprise on this year. And we just can't have another year like the past year. And I think they realize that as well. But, I think it's important with us as the state board, just to go on records, acknowledging the concerns about what happened and just saying, we gotta be on our game this time around. And hopefully, I think they'll have a staffing model that will allow them throughout the year to maintain a 95% rate. And we don't have that dip during cold and flu season. So I'm excited to work with, all parties on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Representative. I also appreciate you all giving us the language, giving us, so we can have this discussion at the working session. I'll add one final comment. I also appreciate in the now be it resolved clause. I think it's in that clause, that there, maybe it's not in that clause, but there's a mention of like what continuing the resources for like the hiring fair and those practices, because there's actually no guarantee that continues to happen. And it actually takes a certain amount of alignment from DC government that we should not take for granted. And so naming that as a support that would be needed, I think it gets to your point of not just piling on, but also making sure that we are raising things that can be helpful to solve the problem we have.
I put one comment in here that I think is worth exploring. I don't know the correct verbiage of it, but it's to increase the wait time for students from 2 minutes to, I put 5, but I don't really know like what the best measure for determining that is. I know that, Tyler and Yolanda Corbett talked about this a couple months ago, but the wait times are really punitive, especially when buses are running late. Especially for students who have trouble well, especially if there's not strong communication and they're not sure when the bus is going to arrive, having only 2 minutes makes it really difficult to plan accordingly. So I think that's a suggestion we should consider including.
I thought Darren added that language because I had just said that, but I was like, oh, Darren must be taking notes. But it was you. Thank you.
This is their legal responsibility, right? So I don't feel like we have to solve all the problems. Like, I don't think that should always.
Representative Reed.
Question about the be it resolved, what is it? Be it resolved, the UCPS charter and private schools should hold harmless in evaluations, teacher, staff, that one, I would give you a number, but I don't have it, but I get the spirit of that one, but I'm not sure how that is measured. And maybe an ask is like, do we know from baseline? I think it's what a lot of parents are calling on of how many lost hours have there been? So calling off possibly provide that information versus right now we don't know what is the instructional loss, and then how would we really hold like the teachers. I'm not sure with that the evaluation. I mean, I get the spirit of it, but I'm just not sure how would that be enforced without having some baseline knowledge of what was lost.
Representative Reed, I think that's a great point. I mean, this was in one of the ANC resolutions that I read. I tried to look holistically at all of them. I think it's definitely in the spirit of this that we don't want to, punish our teachers who may be evaluated through impact or another system, because students have been harmed by these failures. But without specific data, I don't think we need to mention it either. I'd be fine with taking it out, and then we could just follow up with a discussion about it. It was just something I thought was definitely within the spirit of it, but I think it's something we would need in. And just to also go to Representative Burnstead's point, I would love to put that in there because
There's like a little comment.
I think it should be in the resolution itself even, because I think, you'll see kids, particularly if you have a child with physical disabilities or something who may be waiting for the bus that's late and has to use the restroom or something. And then the bus comes and then they can't get out there because there's not communication in time. So making sure that, we're giving, our students the opportunity to catch the bus, I think would be something that I would love to work with Darren to include in the resolution. So just want to thank you both for your comments, and I would definitely, put the one deletion in and then the addition as well, if other members support it.
Add one other thing too. So one thing I'm curious about is hearing from the bus drivers, like this part of this problem is a workforce problem, and the Healthy Schools Facility Network work, we had a custodian come in and serve on a panel. But just the value in and just getting an idea of what's going on the ground. And with like the hiring fair, what's that onboarding process and capturing and holding bus drivers, similar to teacher retention, bus driver retention. And this is like a national problem. So what's going on in DC that maybe we can point that? I know the resolution's being worked on right now, but it is another element to it.
What was the result of the hiring fair? Like, how many are onboarded? How many are still here? What else is needed? That this was a magical to solve everything are questions that I had.
You brought it up, well, that's a good question. I don't have the number on.
I mean, I wasn't.
the top of my head, but you mentioned also that it might be a seasonal issue too. So there's a little bit of things.
And we may learn from them about that too. When you meet with them.
I was gonna say, one of our previous working sessions, following the hiring fair, Superintendent Grant actually did report out on how many people were hired and how many people, it's like those, so I don't remember all of the things, but I do know at that point, we did get an update from, and then there were also questions during the council oversight around some of those things. If that's information that members are interested in.
It's not an unreasonable ask, is it, to ask Ossie about the numbers, because we're pondering a resolution about busing.
That question.
Yeah. It's not unreasonable, is it? I mean,
But
it's public knowledge, it has to be public.
it's not unreasonable, and that's an agenda item that we have.
It's already an agenda item.
Okay, so we can bring that up on Monday with Ossie.
It's literally an agenda item around omnibus.
Yeah.
That's why I was like,
I
is
knew
that a question?
Yeah, but I just wanted
Did you ask?
members to know that.
Oh, okay.
May I make one point on top of what Larry said?
Yeah.
So just to add to that, I think, hearing from them, when you get an opportunity to meet with them, I think what would be interesting to see is what the attrition rate is for these positions as well. So that make sure that this is a position probably that has a lot of turnover. So just making sure they have a plan over the summer that, if they typically lose people over the summer who get other jobs, that they have then that they're keeping these hiring fairs going. Because I was a little concerned to see reductions to this budget line this time around, particularly when we need to staff up. So I think I know you all will ask those questions, but I think just making sure that they realize this isn't a one-time thing with a couple hiring fairs, and they've got to keep replacing the people they lose. So we don't have this happen again.
I mean, that was one of the reasons I said I'm happy to see it in there. Because it wasn't like, literally, it wasn't a thing. And it could become a one-time thing. Yes. Other discussion? Yes.
Just on that, I think one of the issues was not anticipating retirements at the end of the year, so. Building in anticipation.
Is that something you want to, when you say building, you mean noting in the resolution? Or do you mean, or is it something else?
I don't know, it's just raising that point.
Representative Henderson, one of the things that we always look for in this too, which is important, is if they get pay raises over a certain period of years that are retro, you'll sometimes see a lot of people go at once, because like if they get paid based on like their last 3 years, so they get a big pay bump for 3 years going retro, you'll see a bunch of people who are waiting for that to hit to suddenly leave. So I think that'd be something also to look at, is to see if there's any wage increases planned for these folks, where we could look at a retirement bubble and where you got people dropping out. So that's a great point. And it would be something I think to continue to work with OSIAN.
Okay. I'm gonna ask one last time. And then I'm gonna move us along. Further discussion? All right, if not, I'm gonna move us on to the SR on the approval of the social studies.
So that draft resolution is also in your inbox. It was attached to the same email that had it's in your inbox. And what you will see and what we have often done is that OSI drafts the initial resolution. And our staff then go back and we edit or adjust things based on feedback from the board. So if there are things in there, so they have supplied this, they have already met with the student advisory committee. So they do not have to come on Monday. So they've already completed that part. They also submit, there's an equity statement that goes with each statutory resolution. Also, they have sent both of those. And so our staff, Kathleen, is the lead on this particular resolution and reviewing it to make sure that it contains what the board wants to say. And so if there are areas where you want things to be added or things amplified, I think this, well, now is the time to say so that you can go back and you can make edits. And I would just say, just also noting what Dr. Grant said about, like, this is going to be a big deal. The Washington Post literally called us and asked if they could be in the meeting today.
already. So like, there are already articles out comparing our standards to the Virginia standards that are in the newspaper. So like, these things are already picking up steam. So it's going to get more so once the vote occurs. So just being aware of like other things that we want to say in this resolution, that we want out of the media that maybe aren't here or said a certain way.
I think Dr. Grant really honed in on the standards being inclusive. And I don't know if I see that in any of our whereas, so maybe add that as a highlight. Other things like civil rights, I saw the American with Disabilities Act quoted today in our standards. Andrew mentioned LGBTQI plus community, honed in on those highlights. Also highlighting the emphasis on the DC history of it, as well as global perspectives. I believe seeing like that content aspects of what might be different from 20, was it maybe not gonna do that, 2006 to now.
Your thoughts? Are we running out
Yeah,
of steam?
So that was mine, was about action civics. Because I just think there's something said one about the standards, but then something to be said for students to actually put standards in an active way and not just passively learn, but really to apply those as a part of their work. I think it just it's another way in which the district is pushing our students to be critical thinkers and learners of the material and to make it real for themselves versus just its history and social studies.
You stated, Madam Director, that this is gonna be a big deal, that you've got inquiries from the folks. That takes my monitoring our status, not being a state and outside entities inquiring about these investment country, post inclusive social study standards. Have there been any other inquiries that think that someone would outside who does have some authority weigh in on any of this?
Once ago, when the standards were first released, there was some like an article in the kind of clickbait talking about the wokeness of the standards. But that wasn't mainstream media and it wasn't from a particular person or group of people versus I think it was someone who has a particular media platform. I mean, it's not even a famous person. I don't have no idea who it was. And it didn't generate any other additional buzz or conversation.
Yeah, so this has been different on, I'm not giving voice to a bunch in our spaces. But I know that in the public comment, there were some national people who commented on our standards. I don't think we know. I think as a jurisdiction, we have been surprised at times when Congress and others have started to pay attention to us. But we also have not had the level of visibility that I anticipate there will be once they are passed.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons it's actually been really important to have things like an expert panel do review, not that not that public comment or the engagement we have as members or other those things aren't important as far as the improving the product, as far as what we want for ourselves and our students. But I do think that I don't feel out of turn in saying both Superintendent Grant and I, when she says like there has been a tag team effort, this is one of the things that's been in the back of both of our kids. And so there are things that are built into the process to kind of like buffer us from the outside. I call it like we have been using our inside voices to get feedback from the people who we represent, we teach, those who teach here care about more than like our outside voices, because they should not dictate our standards. So we have been, I don't know if we've been lucky or we've been good in that way. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But there are things built in for that. Thank you. Yes.
We'll have a target on our backs. What's different between what we're doing and what other boards of education in the country are doing is there are a lot of school boards and local school boards and statewide school boards that are changing the standards or getting rid of or the standards or conservatizing the standards to fit what they're talking. What we're doing is putting a standard out there that looks the way it should look. So that the target, you know, just because you got a target on your back doesn't mean that somebody's going to shoot you. And we're going to be, this is going to be an interesting thing that's happening in the next couple of months. When this, because it's going to be public, it's going to be publicized. But if you think about just that little list of people who endorsed the standards, I mean, those are the people that you want to have endorse you. And the whole system, both the public school system and the charter school board endorsed it. Like the MICVA challenge and all these other people that you'd want to have in your corner. So I think that it's going to be exciting. Can I erase the target on my back comment?
No, I think it provides situational awareness.
Right,
Yeah, especially now that we have a need. So
Yeah.
right.
hopefully just, bringing some energy. The conversation we had, just to be mindful of that.
All right, so is there other discussion on the language for the resolution specifically? I do want to remind members that they can always like send an email, make a comment. These things will be in SharePoint probably tomorrow morning sometimes. If you have delayed thought or feedback, it is not delayed, it's not too late. I think I have some of my own, so I think we're on equal footing with that. So if there's not further discussion.
I mean, I just want to underscore what Representative Reed and Executive Director Butler said about the content in Action Civics. Because having taught Action Civics for over 10 years, like it's unique. It's some of the most enjoyable parts of the year. Like kids get a lot out of it. So I think highlighting that, us being DC, would allow us to be in a good place to respond with that at the forefront.
Okay. The invitation to stand, seeing no movements. Motions. Okay, so hopefully, we'll be able to set the standard on social studies standards fairly soon. I want to thank you members for your time and engagement tonight. And anyone who, oh, I'm sorry.
I know, it's getting late and I'm over here adding to
Oh, no.
everybody's time. I am everybody's favorite person right now, I know
It's
it.
just the way, no, it's just the way my script is set up, cause like I literally checked
Oh, it's
things.
all good. Uh,
Representing the best.
Yeah, no, so, thank you guys. I'll try to be as quick as I can, but I did write something, because I wanted to make sure that I was streamlined in my thought. So as you all know, we're kind of amid a technological revolution right now. AI is reshaping industries and transforming the way that we think, the way that we learn. And it's not really just a thing of the future, like it's actually here. And I firmly believe that if we wish to improve outcomes for our students, we need to consider embracing what it means to better prepare our students for the future and equip them with the necessary skills to thrive in our new reality. I want to implore each of my fellow board members to advocate for and develop a resolution to create a set of academic standards directly related to artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. For students, these standards would provide clear learning goals and a structured aligned curriculum and the necessary knowledge and essential skills to navigate an AI-driven world. For teachers, these standards will provide structures and a roadmap for effective instruction while also enhancing the understanding of the capabilities of AI and improve the quality of instruction. Then the question is, why do I believe that this is important? McKinsey Global estimates that 400 million jobs worldwide will be automated by 2030, while Goldman Sachs believes that 18% of our job force will be computerized. And while there inevitably will be jobs that are lost to the boom, the World Economic Forum states that nearly 97 million jobs will be created by 2025, indicating a shift in employment landscape due to technological advancements like AI. These statistics highlight the urgent need to prepare our youth for an AI-driven future. If the role is to prepare students to be ready for life post-secondary school, then we cannot continue to simply educate them for jobs that may no longer exist by the time they enter the market. My ask is kind of two-pronged. I would like to propose the board to have further conversation about artificial intelligence and hopefully get to a place where we can draft a resolution to develop and integrate academic AI standards into our existing K-12 standards to ensure that our students have a solid foundation in AI literacy, critical thinking, prompt engineering, and problem-solving skills. The second part would be to work with OSSE to draft those sets of standards on AI. And by doing so, we will not only empower our students to leverage AI in their future careers, but also enable them to become responsible digital citizens who can understand, analyze, and shape societal implications of AI. Once again, my thought process on this is it's not something that's coming, it's something that's here. And right now, if we don't provide standards for it, if we're saying that we want to prepare our students for this future that they're really soon going to jump into, then we have to make sure that we actually have some structure around it so that our teachers aren't going in blind, but also so that we actually have some strategic approach to how we can better prepare our students for the future.
Okay, I want to invite discussion on this topic. I want to also note, because I'm going to forget, but given we are entering a conversation, part of one of the opportunities as far as the cadence with OSSE is an opportunity for standards that we currently do not have. So like we currently, not only do we currently not have financial literacy standards or currently not have standards on AI, we also currently don't have standards on things like social emotional learning, which are also here. And so I think this is a good example of things that we should consider and like not just reviewing what we have, but places we might want to consider adding to our canon of standards. Just because I'm gonna forget, because the goal is to build that with OSSE together. As far as what will be that, what would that include moving forward? So I'm inviting you to do that discussion.
Maybe we could do a panel.
Was that your discussion item as well?
It was basically the same thing. I had the opportunity to sit with you and talk with you, and I know I didn't know a lot about it, but your discussion on it, kind of educating me on it, was very helpful. And how it works and how we deploy, what it means for our students and stuff like that. If you could do that for the larger group or put together a group that could do that for us, that would be very helpful.
Representative Reed.
I'm happy you're raising it. I'll just put what I emailed you. Do we have a larger technology standard for our state,
Our state.
Our state, we do, that's, yeah. We have integrated technology standard. Okay, so I guess that my homework is to review that and then see how the AI will work into that. But I think I'm losing my last piece, but yes, that was it. Oh, I'm sorry, you know, remember. And then in the conversation on Monday, I believe Representative Henderson raised, our standards don't have a landing page at IC. What you said, Representative?
It's hard to find like. Here are all the learning standards from us.
So maybe if they create a page with all of our learning standards. In last data.
One thing I would say is that this is already like a thing that we need standards around it because this is already something we use in school. We've had lessons about this. Like my physics teacher, who Darren, I can maybe connect you with him because I think he'd be a great panelist if he had a panel on this, because he's already doing like AI education. But I think that underscores the importance to have these standards. I think it's interesting if it's a conversation that isn't just like a STEM conversation, because we're seeing the effects of AI appear in other classes, and it's just as important to give teachers the skills to teach them as it is to give teachers the skills to build norms around how we use AI, because it is inevitable, and kind of defining like, this is what cheating is, this is what plagiarism is, this is how you can use things as tools versus how like these are obviously standards set by schools, but we can provide like input or peer input from panelists. I think it's very interesting.
But I said. So was that a yes?
Thank you. I'm curious why in what you've been reading, what you've been thinking about, it starts with standards and not a program or a different approach as the first step.
Well, I think Lee just like shared like the foundational components of it, right? With most things that we do as educators, there's some form of standards that guides our instruction, right? Right now, we have people who, if we're saying that this is important, and this is something that we know that our students are gonna need in the future, I don't think that simply like a small program would suffice. I think that we need to make sure that we're building skills from a young age. Now, I'm not saying that we're teaching the kids how to use like ChatGPT in the 3rd grade, right? Think of it as like a calculator, right? When they're in 3rd grade, we still teach them, multiplication, division, all that. As they get older, they start using calculators and graphing calculators and still have to explain their responses. But what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, we can't say that our teachers are responsible for teaching something or our students are responsible for learning something if we don't have the fundamental foundational approaches around or structures around it to ensure that they're doing it the right way.
I'm interested. I also think about the massive inequities in our city and how still only 27% of our kids are reading by 4th grade, to be able to use ChatGPT to begin with, and how useless in school it is as language learning model for more than the majority of our kids before that tool is. I mean, understanding the impacts of that for the classroom and for their futures makes a ton of sense to me. Also, just the digital divide and access to broadband at home currently is so stark that access to those technologies for a lot of our families is not even physical. It's not in their hands even. So I think of, yes, I want to make sure that we're building that in a way that is not adding to our teachers and pulling out of the other basics, and also acknowledging that yes, their jobs, their careers, their futures, our futures are going to be changed by this very quickly, and don't want to be blindsided by it, but also don't want to be reactionary.
Yeah. Yes, and right. I think like Lee said, it's already happening. It's already taking place in the schools. Our teachers are using it, some of them. And some students are learning how to utilize it with fidelity, and then some students aren't. And so when we think about equitable approaches, we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as what they're being taught on how to utilize this. Now, I'm not saying, once again, that we're saying that kids are going to be using ChatGPT in the 3rd grade. But I think that when we talk about like logical reasoning and things of that nature, like to ensure that we are preparing them for that, like if you gradually build over time to get to a space where that technology will be useful. And I do think that it could also be an equalizer. There's so many different things, like, I don't know if you've started to play around with different AI tools, but there are lots of ways that you could actually use that to help strengthen some of the things that children, some of their weaknesses. And so like you can even quiz yourself, you can do all types of things, but I just think that in general, we need to realize that this is here. And I would not want us to be like some other school districts like in New York, where they're saying we're just banning this. Because I want to make sure that we are actually setting our students up to be successful in life once, they graduate from, 2030 is really close. That's really. Say it again.
You can't see me,
Oh.
because we have this spread like this. What I don't mean to interrupt, but I do mean to interrupt. I want to ask, if maybe I think we started from a place of, can we have a resolution around this? And I think maybe the place.
Discussion first and then resolution.
Well, no, I mean, as far as like the agenda item, as I wrote it
Oh,
down,
okay.
it was like resolution on AI.
Okay.
And I think the place, maybe we can start from is like, what is the conversation we need to have around this and some of the steps we need to take? Because to be clear, it's not like this is, since there's no like resolution in front of us, we would not be voting on this in June. We do have space and time, and I heard some suggestions as far as like panels and other things. I also noted for myself partially that this is one of the examples of like, what are new things we could talk about as far as like, how do we add standards, right? And so I think that we have at least some consensus around the discussion and the exploration. I don't think we have to figure out tonight all of the steps. I also don't think we have to say, and I also don't think we have to list all of the merits tonight or like potential challenges, because I can't imagine either that we could create an exhaustive list. I also would imagine we would be exhausted trying to create a list. But I do appreciate you raising this as an opportunity. And I think we are in a place, if I'm reading members correctly, that they would be interested, probably more than interested, excited about other things, engaging around what this looks like moving forward. Is anyone like, no, President Thompson, you are nuts, and I would be very unhappy if we talked about this further. All right, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last thing we have for new business. So again, this time, now that we've actually moved through the full agenda, I want to thank everyone for their time and engagement tonight. Are you looking at me like that was not the last thing? Oh, okay. I'm just making sure, because once then it's the last thing. Thank you, members, for your time and engagement tonight. As a reminder to our viewing public, if you hung in there with us, we'll continue to hold these in person, and we will convene our June public meeting on June 21st in the old council chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. Seeing no other business before the board, I would happily entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjournment? All right, thank you. This meeting of the state board is adjourned at 8:38 p.m. on June 7th, 2023. Thank you all.